it's not letting me invite Greg for some reason. But if Greg, if you're in here, send me a request for you to join and I'll add you. Okay, Tom, I just accepted you. Yeah. I just hit an accept.
Ahoy.
How are you?
Good, brother. How are you?
Great.
Where's Greg?
Waiting on him. If he could send a request, waiting on that. So
Jordan, I don't really look at this as like a debate, to be quite honest. Like, I was supposed to moderate it, but Dan thought I was going to debate with him, but it's not really a debate. Like, I don't care how Greg teaches, right? I'm sure Greg's a great teacher. I just have some questions for Greg, and then Dan could say whatever he wants, and Greg could say whatever he wants. But yeah, I'm not really like looking to argue. Like, I don't really care, bro. You know, like, I'm pretty sure
I just added Greg, by the way.
Is he here?
It'll take a second.
Hey,
what's up, y'all?
buddy? Greg, what's up, brother? How are you, man?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. There's a rule. We have to all take off our shirts before we start.
Dog, y'all are too big for me, bro. I'm too skinny.
So, yeah. So initially, when I said I was going to moderate this debate, and then I was on the way home from Thailand, and I saw that I was talking to you as well, and I accepted the request before reading it, saying I was actually partaking in the debate, where it's no big deal. For me, this is really not like a debate. I'm not looking to argue. I just like to ask you a few questions. Yeah. You could explain your approach.
Yeah, for sure, man.
And the one thing I'll start with saying is, like, how I run my class. We start off by doing takedown for takedown, and then I'll say, all right, well, takedown, roll to your knees, chase the back. Then takedown, roll to your knees, chase the back, escape the back. Now, takedown, roll to your knees, chase the back. Don't let them escape, but you can't strangle. Person who is trapped only can escape. All right. Once you escape, you have to mount to an offensive position. No submissions yet. And then, I do things such as that. We'll start from the half guard. We're fighting underhook for underhook. We're not allowed to reverse. We're not allowed to pass. We just need to fight for the underhook. And then what I do is, if I see people are having a specific issue, whatever they're doing wrong, I'll pull them in, I'll discuss it, I'll go over it, and then we'll drill it for a few minutes. And then we'll break off and do those situational live rounds again, depending on what I feel we need at the time. And I'll have a base approach to what I take every week. But, I'm just interested in how you feel that drilling is hurtful. That's all.
Well, yeah. So I don't understand where you guys are coming from. So I'd like to establish that first.
You're sideways, bud.
I know, because I have my phone charged, so I have to, like.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Didn't know if you knew.
Of course. I mean, I have eyes, but that's cool. Just a small thing. I'm not really sure where you guys are coming from, and we can talk about it in any which direction. But before I give any answers, I just want to make sure we're kind of talking about the same thing. I don't want to get into the science of things if you guys are unfamiliar with the language that I'll use to talk about it, because I don't want this to be I don't understand the words this side or the other thing. I'd like to have a productive conversation.
Well, what I want to do is I want you to explain it to people, maybe a teenager who's watching it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like this, instead of saying peripheries, why don't we say limbs? Yeah. Instead of saying center mass, why don't we say torso? Right? So it's not about, like, because here's the thing, a good teacher could teach to anybody, right? That's what it comes down to.
Right.
So that's the approach I want to take.
Me too, and that's why I'm setting this off. So first, I guess, a question for Big Dan, and then so we can get started, just so I'll answer your question about drilling is, in your own words, could you describe to me what you think the ecological approach is, or what you think ecological dynamics is?
So what do I believe that the ecological approach is? I believe that.
Don't what do you believe? What is it?
Greg, we're trying to have a constructive conversation here. if like it's coming off on like
Yeah,
super
let him talk. Go ahead.
yeah, like do you want to have a constructive conversation, or how do you want to?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure how you're interpreting me. This is the sound of my
Well,
voice.
here's the thing. You asked him what is the ecological approach, and I think Dan said what he believes it is, and he's saying he's not exactly. Maybe he's not 100% sure, so he's going to tell what he believes it is.
I'm
I think,
all ears.
and then you cut him off.
Okay.
That's all. Go ahead.
So I believe that the ecological approach is a approach to learning jujitsu where there's no emphasis on direct instruction, and you use constraint-based what's it called? Constraint-based rounds to build your skill rather than being told what to do.
Okay.
In a
That's
very
not what it
short.
is, but and I can clarify that for you. It's not a
Okay.
problem. So now I understand that you don't understand, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that in a negative way. It just really helps me guide what I'm going to say to you. What about the other side of things? Are you familiar with the information processing view of skill acquisition?
Why don't you explain it to the chat, or
Well,
explain it to somebody who doesn't know?
I'm going to. I'm. That's what I'm here for, and I'm open to
Okay.
anything you guys have to ask me. But what you said to me is that what you wanted to do is prove to me that the ecological approach is bullshit and that it wasn't a viable approach to learn the jiu-jitsu skill, which is fine. I
Well, here's
accept
the
that.
thing, Greg. Can I jump in real quick? I think this all started. I think everybody saw a clip with you basically saying, "I'll save you guys on a $400 instructional for leg locks." Who was that? That's John Danaher. Bring your legs to the inside or the outside. And like you made it seem like it's much simpler than it is. Like I'll tell you right now, I'll let 99% of people start fully in an outside locked heel hook, and Dan could attest, and they're never going to finish it because they just don't have the dynamics to do so. So my thing is, I don't care what you teach. Your students have been doing well. Our students competed against each other a while back, Alex and Sophia. But why do you feel the need to, Dan didn't go at you first. You came at, indirectly, you came at Danaher's DVD. And everybody took it that way.
Okay.
Everybody, the entire world.
Yeah, because we're stuck in a market of clickbait, rage bait, read the subtitle and think you understand the whole thing problem. It's a cultural problem. And if I just shared my opinion about something, that's one thing. Okay, it's just my opinion, but my opinion is based on sound reasoning. So rather than people ask me why I hold that opinion, which I do appreciate you're doing now, they assume what they think I mean based on their own ignorance rather than listen.
Tell us what you mean then.
Well, wait,
Tell us why our approach, the way it's been done for a lot. Actually, it's changed over the years tremendously. The way I teach now, like how I told you, I explain how I teach my class is not the same way I used to teach it 10 years ago. It's not like 50 arm bars for 50 arm bars. A lot of positional training, a lot. I was with Marcelo Garcia in one last weekend. He does the same exact thing that I do. I know Hadra Gracie does the same thing that I do. Because I got a lot of these ideas from these guys because I trained with them. Yeah. Why is it that direct instruction at times is not conducive for jiu-jitsu? Because wouldn't that be similar to saying, all right, like basketball players like Kobe and Michael Jordan used to get on the court hours before the court and just throw shots, practice shots. There's no one around them. They're just practicing the mechanics of their shot. They're not scrimmaging every day, all day. They're drilling specific shots. So I want to know more about this because if it could help me, I want it to help me. Yeah, but I can't see how drilling direct instruction, because inches are miles in jiu-jitsu. So if I have my hand misplacement wrong, even an inch, that's going to hurt me. So
that's an assumption.
That's just something we agree to disagree on then.
So much because we haven't given our evidence for why we believe that to be true. So it's fine that we could have different opinions. And usually how we determine the truth of a matter is the weight of the evidence. And the evidence usually should lean on the side of experimentation, not just anecdotal understanding or even theory. So experimentation is really what we're looking at.
I have experimented that with beginning students from the beginning, trying to allow them to train live from the beginning in positional situations, and it never worked out very well. I believe when you're an advanced student, I believe we could take that approach almost 100% of the time. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean, maybe, but we would have to put that under deeper investigation before we could say that. To make a claim that I did this, it doesn't work, therefore, that's a very strong statement about the nature of reality. So what you're doing, you're using your own personal experience to talk about human behavior at large. So that's a very strong statement. I'm not even confident that I would make that statement. And I've read quite a bit about human behavior. So I wouldn't even say that.
Could you define it a little bit more, just so everybody that's watching can understand where you are so hell-bent on this one way against?
What would you like me to define for you?
Where am I going wrong
Okay.
in my instruction?
I don't know. I've never seen you teach, so I would have to watch
from what I just told you, like you said, buying instructionals are maybe you said it could have been taken out of context, right? And I trust me, I've had a lot of things taken out of context for me. Do you think buying instructionals are useless? Because that's what the one clip made it sound like.
Well, I know, because they did that on purpose. I even messaged the guys when they put that out, and I was like, hey, dude, come on, what the fuck, right? Like, this is going to get rage baited. It's not even my whole opinion. Like, there was an hour and a half worth of content, and not only that hour and a half worth of content, but I've done about 20 podcasts where I've defended these things in many different ways. But people don't click on that. People click on the thing that makes them emotionally charged up, and that becomes what they think I say. And so then now everyone ends up arguing over this straw man that was propped up to get more clicks on a title. You know, it's even funny. They titled that whole episode, "The Greatest Lie in Jiu-Jitsu, Instructionals Don't Work." That's not even what we were talking about. We were talking about a different way to learn skill. And they titled it to get people attracted to it, distracting from the message. That's unfair.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure. So explain to us more your approach.
So when we're talking about sport or anything, jiu-jitsu, volleyball, throwing darts, we're talking about human behavior. So if we're going to teach a human behavior, we should probably understand what behavior is and how it comes out. So I think there are two fundamental things that we would need to start to investigate if we were to try to pick one intervention or training intervention over another. I think the two things we would have to investigate, which are investigated, are these two things. One, how do we control movement? Why does movement look the way it does? How do we change it? Why is it consistent? Why is it inconsistent? We need to know a little bit about that. Like, how does the human brain, the nervous system, the whole human, how do they control movement? And the second thing is what is information? Is information stuff that's stored in here, or is information stuff out there? And what's the relationship between this information and my ability to access it? So if we don't know fundamentally how these two things operate, we're going to have a very difficult time at choosing training interventions to help change our students' behavior. And so there's a huge field of research that studies this, and there are opposing views. So we have the information processing view on one side that treats the brain like a computer, and I can explain that if you'd like. And then we have the ecological dynamics view, which treats behavior as an emergent quality based on the relationship the acting agent has with the task they're performing and the environment in which they're performing them. And so there are opposing views of a person's relationship with information and how that informs behavior.
I agree with what you're saying. I have a student now that's training with you, Paxton. He says our classes are actually very similar. Paxton's a great guy, man. He's fun. Really but again, so my thing, like I said, I'm not looking to debate or say your way is shit. I'm just saying, why is it that drilling even 10 minutes, 15 minutes per class is negative?
Okay, I wouldn't say that it's negative all across the board. What I'm saying is if drilling is our main training intervention, we're saying a lot about the nature of drilling. We're saying that if you statically do these things this way, this many times, that you're going to have an effect. So this effect is studied across a wide range of sports. When we take a movement pattern and we decontextualize it, that means we take it out of the performance setting and we practice it in an isolated fashion, like static drilling. It doesn't go back into the performance environment. When you decontextualize a skill, you end up creating a new skill. So what you end up getting better at when you drill is drilling. You don't get better at the thing you're trying to do. You actually get better at drilling. And what's interesting about drilling statically is even if we do it, like you have one group drill something statically over here, and then you have one group over here do something similar but don't tell them what to do. When they test their performance outcomes, these two groups, they're the same. And so what that says is the information that you're giving them for the drill is largely ignored by the nervous system, by the brain, by the human movement system, whatever you want to call it. So
agree with
You
you.
you guys see it happen all the time, and
Well,
you
no,
don't realize you're seeing it.
but here's the thing. That's the way I feel teaching used to be. All right, everybody, 100 arm bars each, 50 triangles each. It's not like that anymore. For now, for me, drilling is only it's much shorter just to make sure before we break off, we have the correct position of where we're placing our hands, our hips, our knees, our knee
Okay.
line. That's it.
Do you mind if we pause there? That you made a good
Sure.
point I'd like to talk about. So the idea of correctness is something we need to talk about. So if you say that the hands go here and they must go here, what you're doing is you're constraining the learner to a specific search area to pick up information. But what you'll probably notice too is even when you have them drill that and you go see them live, they do not stick to that, because we don't, that's not how we develop relationships with the world. We don't look for an idealized movement. Instead, we have a relationship with what we're doing and the feedback we're receiving in real time. And so the goal of ecological dynamics, or one of the goals is to keep the action and the thing we're acting against together at all times. So there are different ways to scale this so that we're not just saying, go, fight, go, but there needs to be live resistance for correctness to emerge. Nothing is correct outside of the context in which we use it.
There
So if I,
absolutely needs to be live resistance. I agree with
right,
that. I 100% agree. The only thing I'll disagree with you right there is I'll use the heel hook for an example. I do believe I know some people that get higher up on the forearm. For me, it's not effective unless people put the watch grip on me,
Freeze,
right?
real quick, check this out. Sorry, Tom, I'm interrupting. You're actually making my point for me, and I appreciate that. So you're right. For you,
No,
there's
no,
a way that
no,
you,
no, but not just for me to get caught, but for when I say for me, like I've trained with some of the best leg lockers in the world: Eddie Cummings, Gary Tonin, Gordon, Dan, all these guys, and I truly believe the ability for them to know exactly where to put their hand at the right time. Your wrist is going to be in a certain place when your partner's back is to the mat compared to when they're rolling out, compared to where your knee line is placed. Like there is specifics in jujitsu, and it's not. I don't believe it's as broad as you're
there's,
saying.
no. Here's the thing. Specifics are everything, but
Yeah.
how we gain access to that level of specificity isn't through static drilling, and it isn't through verbal interventions.
No, but
These
don't you
things,
agree that drilling sometimes just to like, all right, before we break, just again, before I do a scrimmage in basketball, I'm warming up a little bit. I'm shooting some baskets, right? Like I don't believe anyone should drill an hour of class. That's
for
crazy,
sure, me too. I
you
think
know?
it's crazy too.
But a
So the
little
human
bit.
body, doesn't know what it's doing when you're warming it up. It does not know the difference between shaking violently or doing the heel hook you showed them. The body temperature is going to rise. The synovial fluid is going to start to warm up. The heart rate's going to increase. And what you're doing in warming up is you're actually not learning anything. You're getting to a state of preparedness. And this is seen when they study what's called the warm-up decrement. So basically, they notice that, let's say we do a day of training, and it takes a while to get students moving, right? And then the next day, same thing, next day, same thing. But if we look at this over a long enough timeline, each time an athlete goes to reach that state of arousal where they're ready to fight, the period is shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter each day. So the warm up is no longer as effective after a
Well,
certain period of time.
the warm up that we do is a real life warm up. A lot of times it's flow rolling or it's specific positional stuff where you're not being explosive, where you're not going to have to, like, if we're starting from the back, you're not exploding out of that, so you're not going to cause an injury, right? So again, I believe our classes are very similar. I just feel sometimes people have thought it's like you're trying to reinvent the wheel,
People
right? Where it's
think
like
that because, and I'm not calling anyone stupid, but they
you
are
can, you
ignorant.
could. People are stupid though. It's okay.
I'm sure, but instead I write, people are ignorant of what I'm saying. They haven't done the reading. They haven't done the research. They haven't done the application. So what they don't understand is there is an entire field dedicated to experimentation of these ideas. And experiment is showing, and we're starting to drift. Imagine that the IP is over here on the left and ecological dynamics is on the right, or something like it. The experimental evidence is starting to shift towards information as being stuff out there, and that behavior as being an emergent quality of the relationship we have with it. And so not the theory, the experimentation is starting to agree with it. And
100%
so
it is.
there's
But
a
do you
thing.
think that drilling has no place whatsoever? Even 10 minutes? That's
Okay.
my whole thing. My
Okay.
whole
Okay. All
entire
right.
thing.
Let me give you my perspective based on what I think I understand. So, because I've done a little bit of experimentation myself, but let me talk about the science first. So, Carl Newell has a model of how he thinks skill emerges, and skill goes through 3 stages. Okay, we have the let's say attunement phase. This is when we start to pick up the information by interacting with the world. The second phase we have is the coordination phase. This is when our bodies start to orient into something that looks like a pattern that we can use towards whatever end we're using it for. Then we have the control phase. The control phase is where that movement solution starts to stabilize into something that they can now use. But then it goes from control to skill. Skill is when that movement that you've just started to learn starts to become adaptable towards a wider degree of variability or the stuff you
Greg,
have to face out in front of you.
I hear what you're saying, but again,
I,
I want to make it as simple as
that's
possible.
what
And somebody just
I'm
said,
about to.
somebody said to me right here, Tom, you can't agree and then think you need to drill. So why can't I think we could do positional things without
No,
drilling?
don't listen. Don't listen to the comment section. Okay, listen. The
Well,
supporters are
I
wrong.
want you to answer that. That was one of my biggest
Dude,
questions.
I am really trying to. I'm like giving you all my attention, and I'm not trying to be wordy. But you have to understand that the words that we use, especially when we're talking about the nature of reality, have definitions. And if we can't agree to the definitions and terms that we're using and what these words mean, it's going to be hard to convey the meaning of the words.
All right, so
So when we,
answer that question with however you want to answer it.
I'm really
Could I agree with both?
okay. You not directly. So we have to because they actually are saying different things about how movement emerges. Okay. So what I'm saying is when you drill something statically, you're building a separate skill than when you're doing something live. The information we use to move our bodies when there's no resistance is a different information source than when we use our bodies when there's resistance present. When they do studies on this, like how much transfer happens between 2 groups, the group that does things in a decontextualized manner always underperforms the group that trains in a contextualized manner. Always.
Wouldn't that be saying though that like back in the day when you get some schools that all they do is train live, right? Compared to the school to actually learn instruction. Like I think that was a big thing with Danaher. He
Yeah.
actually started teaching instruction.
Yeah.
You know, we used to go hard. We used to bang every single day. Then when Danaher really started teaching instruction, that made everybody fall back and say, "Oh shit,
Yeah,
we
because
have to learn jujitsu
Danaher
before
did a
we
good
train
thing. Look,
jujitsu."
let me get this straight. I have nothing but positive things to say about Danaher. I only disagree with him on 2 points. Dude, I've taken so much inspiration from him and I've learned so much. I've had 3 in-depth conversations with to take that knowledge about and turn it into knowledge of our actual lived experience.
Look, can I ask you a question? What do you think about it? Like, would this kind of drill be considered similar? Like, all right, bottom person start with the daily heave of grip. The only way the top person can get free is you have to peel the grip, and then you could go live. You could only pass to the left side. You can't pass to the right
Okay,
side.
so
On your
what you're
feet, not
yeah,
on your knees whatsoever.
what you're giving an example of is a task constraint. There are many things we can constrain in the environment. Tasks are just one of those things. So what you're doing is task manipulation. You're putting people in a situation, you're giving them something to do, and you're giving them an outcome they need to reach. This is very good practice. But it can't be as simple as just using the jiu-jitsu symbols and say, oh, it has to be done this way. This is perfect technique. There's something else controlling what we would consider to be optimal. It's not just our idea or aesthetic or what we're looking at as being optimal. It's the effect it's having. And again, it can't just be about the technique. There are other reasons why people move.
Oh yeah, there's move. It's not just technique. There's movement. There's body movement
Right.
in general. There's different
And
body
so,
types, right? There's
absolutely,
different
absolutely,
lengths of limbs. Like all these
absolutely.
things matter.
Tom, everything you're saying is right because you've been a coach. You've been looking at bodies moving around your whole fucking career. So there are things that you've learned just through trial and error without anybody telling you anything because you're literally looking at it live happen in front of you. What I'm saying is there are people who study this who know more about it than you and I because they go deeper than you and I can go.
Yes, but they didn't. I hear that and I agree, but I don't think jujitsu is the same as all these other things because there's so many minuscule, tiny little things.
Right.
Jujitsu is like a bunch of martial arts within a martial art.
I
Think
hear
about
you.
striking and boxing. We have jab, cross, hook, overhand, uppercut, right? Jujitsu, we have all these guards. We have all these different grips, all these body types. There's a million things. First of all, Dan, Greg, let Dan, go ahead and
Oh,
talk. You got anything to say? Sorry,
you're
brother.
good.
So I have a question, right? Would you agree with me that the blue belts of today are better than the blue belts of 10 years ago?
Yes.
You would, right?
Yes.
And the blue belts of 10 years ago were better than the blue belts of 20 years ago, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So as we're going on, the general level, everybody starts on a slightly higher pedestal, right? Everything that humans have done is the idea of passing knowledge through generations, right? Like
Yep.
each generation
100%.
gets smarter and smarter.
Yep.
Do you not
Oh,
agree that the ecological approach stops that? Everybody starts on the same pedestal with
not at
the
all.
ecological
No, that's
approach.
not true.
Okay, but if we took an instructor from 20 years ago or an instructor from today, the instructor from today knows quite a bit more technique,
Oh, okay.
correct? And he would be better off teaching his students with the more technique that he's learned from his instructor, who learned from his instructor, which
Not
had years and years
necessarily.
of refinement.
That's not necessarily
Why
true.
do you believe? Why do you believe that the ecological approach is better than direct instruction, especially when it's been shown that the baseline gets better every
Okay,
year?
so you're asking two different questions. First, you're making assumptions about the nature of historical context. So we'd have to dig into that by itself because there's a reason why things change as history goes on. But we can talk about that as a separate topic because it has nothing to do with ecological dynamics, really. I mean, we could use the historical
I don't
record to argue why.
disagree with constraint-based learning, but what I do disagree with is the fact that not teaching your students direct instruction.
Okay, so
Because if you're drilling something, a lot of times you've drilled something, and I'm sure that there's been a time in your career where you've drilled,
oh
right?
yeah,
I'm sure it's happened
I
to you.
came up under the traditional
You
approach.
did, you did,
I
you did.
wasn't lucky
So,
enough to be trained by
so
someone like me.
would you agree with the fact that there's been times where you've drilled stuff
Wait, did you
incorrectly?
just say you weren't lucky enough to be trained by you? Did you say that?
Someone,
Did you say that?
someone like
That was
me.
amazing. I love. If I said that, the internet would
No,
break. Keep going.
dude, I could say anything. Internet breaks. I'm not talking about me, Greg Souders, like someone who gives a shit and who's willing to
Yeah.
investigate and try to do the best for his students. I didn't have that
No,
luck,
I hear
so
you, bro.
that's what I'm
I'm just
saying.
busting balls.
So did
Don't you
I.
think that when you were drilling something and you were drilling something incorrectly, has there ever been a time where an instructor has come up to you with years and years of technical knowledge and be like, hey, you should do this differently. Your hand's in the wrong place. Your elbow's in the wrong place. You should be doing this. Don't you think that that helped you out immensely rather than just figuring it out in that specific position?
No, it did not.
It did not? Okay, can you please tell us why?
So I actually noticed this problem when I was coming up. So I came from a traditional school and we were heavy into drilling. All we did is drill, 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 drill. I mean, it was high rep drilling. Lloyd Irvin was obsessed with it. That's all we did. But we did a lot of live work too. And I started to notice that none of the stuff we were drilling was happening in the live work. And I didn't understand it at the time.
You
So
trained with Lloyd?
excuse
You
me?
trained with Lloyd Irvin?
I was with Lloyd Irvin my entire jiu-jitsu
He
career.
has a lot of champions, Lloyd.
Oh
A
yeah, for
lot.
sure. We can talk about that too, if you want to
No,
talk about that, but it has nothing to
keep
do with
going.
drilling. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I noticed that there was this gap, and I couldn't explain it. I didn't know. I thought it was maybe me. Man, I'm not drilling hard enough. I'm not drilling fast enough. I'm not drilling often enough. So I would drill 2 hours on either side of my practice, like in the morning, because we had 2-a-days, and then in the evenings. So I was doing an extra 4 hours of drilling a day. Lloyd used to say that I had to get 250 to 500 repetitions every day to be a champion. And that's what I would do. And I took him dead seriously. I was so serious about drilling that Lloyd would send everybody to me. When we would get a new person in the room, he would say, hey, you want to learn shit? Go to Greg. He'll tell you what's up. Like, Lloyd used to leave me to teach all his classes because I could remember them verbatim. So dude, I remembered everything Lloyd said. I remembered all his techniques. I did all the drilling, but none of it was transferring to me. What I started noticing that the stuff that I could do was the stuff I discovered on my own, but I didn't understand I didn't understand wrap my head around it, right? Because I'm the type of dude who listens to his coach. Anyway, eventually I left the team and I started on my own. I realized that there might be something I don't understand about coaching. And so I started researching the topic. At first, I was really deep into Schmidt and fucking Anders Ericsson and all that kind of, computational model of things. And then while stumbling through it, I found this ecological dynamics thing. And then when they started talking about the complex nature of behavior and why behavior emerges and why it is what it is, it answered those questions that I was like, oh my God, now I understand what was happening. And then of course, through going down the rabbit hole, reading the white papers, seeing the experimental evidence, not just the theory, it was blowing my mind. I was like, oh my God, we don't understand what's going on and we just think we do. So anyway, so that's
There
where I'm coming from.
experimental knowledge in jiu-jitsu or just other, is there any experiments that have been proven and tested in jiu-jitsu yet or no?
Okay, no, so what you have to understand is that when we look at human behavior, we can classify them. We don't have to have a highly specific, human movement for soccer, human movement for wrestling. It's all human movement. Now, there are different reasons why things emerge in those fields, but we can catalog them. We could say tasks are either simple or they're complex. Jiu-jitsu is a complex task. Games could be discrete, serial, or continuous in nature. Jiu-jitsu is a continuous game. So when they take jiu-jitsu, or when they take complex continuous games and they apply things like verbal intervention, decontextualized drilling, and also CLA, like what I use, CLA outperforms it every single time the closer we get to complex and continuous.
So, go ahead.
It's almost not even a question anymore. Now they're just trying to discover more about the mechanisms at play.
No, it's not a question, but again, when you look at wrestlers are known. Drillers make killers, man. Like for me, when I would wrestle in the Rutgers wrestling room, and they took an ecological approach with me in the beginning and had me in there with these guys. Well, I wasn't at their level. I was at ADCC. I was an ADCC trial champion, but I wasn't a D1 All-American. I needed to take a step back and drill the double leg 300 times, 400 times, drill the single a few hundred times before I actually was comfortable enough to get in there and do it in a controlled environment where I was getting instruction. For me personally.
Let's hold there because I want to answer Dan's question and we can get back to that point because I didn't fully answer Dan's questions. I kind of gave him a diatribe about how I used to drill and I realized it didn't work. So the thing is we're only assuming that that's what happened because when we put what you're asking under a microscope, people say, oh, this helped me, or I'm doing this when I move. And then when we look at kinematics, we look at biomechanics, we look at data, like a simple one would be like the colloquialism. If you want to be able to hit the ball, hit the ball, keep your eye on the ball. So when they started using eye tracking data, nobody could keep their eye on the ball. People weren't using their eyes on the ball. There was some other reason they were hitting it. When they look at professional, let's say like tennis players, and tend to go, oh, I always held my elbow like this, and they look at the movement kinematics, that's not how they're holding their elbow. So we have a very poor view of why we move and what affects our movement. We don't have a mechanism where we can look in on ourselves and determine what caused the effects of the actions taken. We don't have a strong mechanism for that. And so this is shown time and time again when, again, experimental evidence looks at these claims. They do not find what you guys are asking me about. It's almost not present at all.
Yeah, but we're not doing it in jiu-jitsu though. And here's what I'm saying. It's the level has continued to rise throughout the years.
Yeah,
the way I teach now was much different. We do a lot of controlled, manipulated training, a lot. And I see a lot of the times the way I learn now is by watching my students, what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right. But all I'm saying is I believe there's room to drill for 20 minutes of class. That's it.
Freeze for a second. Okay, dude, Tom, if you like drilling with your students, don't ever stop. Okay?
100%. And I know you're not saying not to. I know.
But let me ask you a question. Let's say you wanted to be the best possible coach you can be, and you looked at experimental evidence that suggested you could use that 20 minutes better. Would you not?
I would do anything I could do
Me too.
to do things better. And I just don't believe stepping away from specific drills of direct mechanics is not good to do. That's all.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if you saw that the thing you're supposing to be happening wasn't happening, people who are literally trained to measure this stuff, and the stuff you're saying is there isn't there, how could you deny the evidence?
I'm not denying it.
Oh, I'm not saying.
I'm not. I'm saying.
I'm asking you. Saying
what I'm saying is, how could you deny that drilling is also not effective? Look what jiu-jitsu has become over the last few years. Like, has Hydra been doing it wrong? Has Marcelo?
Free second. What you're doing is you're not controlling for variables and you're not noting confounders. You're saying that this leads to this, and you're making that unilateral statement without any evidence because you haven't controlled for the other things that could be causing that effect. And so in order to say this causes this, we would need to take everything else away to see if that's in fact what's causing it. See, the type of pedagogy that I focus on is called nonlinear or non-deterministic. So what this means is that we don't know what the input-output ratio is. So we don't know what one rep is, nor do we know what effect one rep has on something else that we're doing. We don't have any data for that. And every time we look for that one piece of input, we can't predict the output. And so what that says is like, there's no deterministic thing here. There's no prescription we can give our athlete to say, hey, if you do this, you'll get this. They haven't found it in experiment. It doesn't seem to exist.
Again, so what you're basically, I'm not disagreeing with, we need different training than it used to be. We need more live training, but not just live training. One of the biggest mistakes I made coming up was just live training with no actual, with no real purpose, right? We need to do positional live training. You know,
we don't do just live without purpose, man.
No, I know that. I know you don't. I know that. I'm very familiar with what you do. I've read about it. I know about it. But here, listen. All I'm saying is that there's people who are at different levels in this sport, and that's a fact. 100%. There's knowledge of jiu-jitsu. Certain people have a higher knowledge than others. I've been doing this for over 20 years, right?
But
I've seen it start in one place and I've seen where it is today. I just believe that we could carve out some time for direct drilling. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less.
Look at it. Like I said, if that's your position, fantastic. But
yeah.
But there's no evidence to defend that position from, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be. If that's what you like, then you do that. Like I am not arguing.
But also the evidence is look at the Dagestani fighters. You know how much they drill. You know how much they wrestle. You know how much they drill.
I hear you.
Look at Kel Souders and how much he drilled. Jordan Burroughs, how much he's drilled. How can we say that it was wrong what they did?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of things at play. So it's not just the drilling. You guys are just picking out the one thing that you want to be the hero of skill acquisition, and it just isn't. And
no, that's what I'm saying. I want to add that, and people are telling me I can't add it. So I'm on board with everything you're saying. Yeah. And you didn't answer my question from before yet. The first thing I asked,
I'm sorry.
Why a lot of people are saying you don't understand it if you're saying that you could do both. You can't drill and you can't do the other. No, I'm saying I want to do both.
That's just people like saying what they don't understand. When I say you can't do both, what I mean is this. We can't assume that the brain does two things. It builds mental models that we use to enact behavior, but then we also pick up information from the environment and we have an online relationship with it that's constantly changing through interaction. Those are two competing ideas. And so if we choose an intervention that assumes the brain is a sensory, short-term memory, rehearsal, long-term memory system, then we would choose interventions that would be reflective of that. If we believe that the athlete needed to perform actions in environments and that was the relationship that caused behavior, then we would choose interventions that assume that. But again, those are two opposing views. And it's not that you can't drill, it's just that drilling is not having the effect that you think it is. That's all.
But I've seen the success that we've had doing it this way. I've seen Gordon, I've seen myself, I've seen Dan. Dan was a shit blue belt that used to complain about people training too rough with him, and now he's an ADCC medalist, you know, like, and he's drilled a ton.
For sure. But you were just assuming that it's the drilling that's causing the effect.
No,
That's
I
the
believe
mistake.
no. I believe it's everything. I believe it is an ecological approach in some aspect, right? It's the controlled training environment, the live training starting from certain positions, but the drilling as well.
The ecological approach is not live training. The ecological approach is a view of the nature of perception and how the perception informs action. It's a
And you can see that through live
view.
training. When I'm watching my students train live, I'm seeing where they're coming up short. I'm seeing where they're flourishing. I'm seeing the mistakes that they're making. I can't see it unless they train live, right? If I don't start them in a certain position, I can't see it. I have to see them.
You know what's interesting? That's exactly right. Because nothing is wrong if it's effective.
And like if they're just drilling, I don't know if they're getting it right. Let's
That's right.
get thrown in the fire a little bit, and let's see. And the problem is this. If we just say, all right, person on top pass the guard, person on bottom defend. If you're getting a really, really tough guard passer, you're never going to get better. So how about the person on top try not to get swept while the person on the bottom tries to sweep?
You're talking about scaling, and every model that we use for learning should have some type of scale in it. The question is, how do we scale it and what do we scale? So we have to know the component parts that we're messing with to try to determine what we want the learner to experience that could affect their behavior. So without that knowledge, we don't know what levers we're pulling. It's like if I just lifted weights, like, yo, bro, I'm gonna go in the gym and I'm gonna put fucking weight on my fucking back and I'm gonna get big. You know, that'll work to a certain point. But if you don't know the relationship between frequency, volume, and intensity, you're going to hit a wall and you're not going to be able to know what to do to switch to turn things on and off.
Real quick, one of your fans just said, I'm sure he's a white belt. The problem is Greg believes science and Tom believes his eyes. No, Tom believes hold on, listen. Hold on, listen. No. But this is why we're doing this, so these people understand. No, I believe results, right? I believe multiple world championships. I believe multiple ADCC runs. I believe multiple ADCC trials titles. That's what I believe. And I believe seeing my students who are not competitors doing well with world-class people. I hear what you're saying, Greg. I do. I just think we just have a little, it's probably more similar than we think. If we taught in the same training room, we'd probably be very similar. We have a little bit of distinction between what we believe is right and what's not. I believe everything you're saying, plus just a little bit of drilling. That's all. I mean, I think if we keep talking like this, we're just going to keep going in circles.
So Dan,
I hear what you're saying.
I really want to hear what you have to say. Let's keep going, Dan. I need to get you in this conversation, man. Let's go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, I want more to say, but it looks like you guys are getting pretty into it. So, another question.
You invited him, bro. You invited him.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Tom's the best. I love him. But here's a question I have for you. If the ecological approach was as effective as it is as a high-level competitor or a high-level instructor, why are the absolute best teams not using it?
Because they're not aware of it.
Because they're not. Well, here's the thing. When you're a high-level competitor, high-level instructor, you're trying to learn everything you possibly can. And constraint-based learning has been around for a while. Like
Danaher is very aware of this. Danaher is aware of this.
Danaher is aware of this, right? And my thing is, you've trained with John before, right? In the blue basement?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the rounds were, you could read it was mount, turtle, closed guard, and then it was probably cross
Our live round. Yep,
our live round. And they were constraint-based, right? And
well, not necessarily.
Okay,
I remember what we did. What we did, but keep going.
Okay, so in the mounted situation, your goal is to get back into some form of full guard. Half guard doesn't count. And if you reverse, if you submit, you switch top and bottom, right? So you're working within.
Amazing.
Correct, right? So, yes. Turtle, same thing, closed guard. Why is it that we also drilled technique beforehand to help us learn something new, and then we added, why can't we have both?
Okay, you're doing that because you are unsure why skill emerges. It is your best guess at what you think is going to initiate the learning effect. You do not know if it works, but it brings
people to ADCC. It brings people to. But why are the best guys doing it?
Have you had a white belt yet that you started with? Get anywhere with this? I know you had a purple belt world champion, right? Like, where are the results you did yet?
Like, I have like 5 purple belt world champions, a few brown belt world champions. I won black belt world champion. I've only been open for 10 years.
Who's the black belt?
Excuse me?
Who's the black belt?
Yeah.
Did she start with you at white belt?
She started me with 12 years old.
Awesome.
She came to me.
That's the one that competed with Sophia, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
And so, but
Yeah,
that's
so
not
you
what I'm
have
arguing.
evidence.
Because
For
listen,
sure.
I'm going to tell you something. My success as a coach is not an excuse for any method. The only thing that I've shown is that you're able to get someone to a high level without explicit instruction and without static drilling. Because I took those two things out of my program because I wanted to control for them. I took the stuff I read seriously and I was like, all right, fine. What's the lowest hanging fruit? What can I remove right now to constrain myself as a coach to see if I can get movement to emerge the way they say it should? And so for me, it was just, I was able to apply the theories that I was reading about. I've never once come out and said that my student success is an excuse for the method that I'm using. Those
Well,
words have never come
I
out of
think
my mouth.
the biggest reason we're even having this is because, again, we misinterpreted. Apparently, they put it wrong out there. You said don't buy a DVD. Like, you made it seem very easy, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to buy a $400 DVD. I just saved you time. But that was taken out of context. You said.
For sure. So wait, Dan. So because Dan is asking good questions that I want him. This is his idea. So you asked me, why do they drill? We drill because we don't know what else to do. Mimicry is one of the best ways we can learn something. So there's a lot of studies that suggest that just watching expert learners move around enhance our ability to pick up information. There's actually a strange effect where we can pick up the affordances of others. So when I watch another person do something, I'm actually picking up the same information they're picking up to do the activity. So there's a lot of transfer that goes on just by looking, just by watching. So what we assume then is if I mimic their behavior in a scaled down, decontextualized way, that's what's going to transfer skill. But again, when that is studied, the skill transfer is not what's expected. We don't get what's expected. There's almost none. Now, there are small effects like here and there for different reasons, but it doesn't transfer to skill.
So what you're saying is watching something will transfer skill because
No. Watching something makes
yeah.
approaching you trying to solve that same problem a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And this
Absolutely. We've all been drilling and we're messing up and we're like, oh, let's watch somebody do it correctly.
Right. But it's not correctly. What you're doing is you're just watching someone effective. And that's interesting because like if you're a big dude. I don't remember I teased you one time and like you were like standing above me and I told my team like, yo, don't let him crush me, bro. If I keep talking shit, he's gonna fold me in half.
Oh, that was
but like
you.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So you're like a big tall guy, right? But if me and you're different body than me. But if you and me were sitting next to each other and there was an object you had to reach out in front of you to grab, I could tell by looking at you if that object was reachable. So I can pick up the information of reachability based on your intrinsic dynamics without having them. So that's an interesting thing. And so in that study, that effect is real, right?
But
and
how does that apply to jiu-jitsu?
Oh, easy. So
reach.
let's imagine that you were new to a skill, right? And I use this. So modeling towards result is an effective way to show somebody something who's never seen it before. So let's say, for example, I want my students to hand fight to an underhook. If I just say, hey, guys, we're going to learn a new grip. We're going to learn an underhook. An underhook is when you put your arm underneath someone else's arm and hook onto them. And I just show them what it is with no further explanation about it. And I hand fight for a few minutes with my buddy without saying anything. And I get my underhook. The people watching are picking up my affordances. And this is especially salient in the early stages of the coordination phase. But this effect seems to like disappear after the coordination phase. But either way, it helps new learners see what's being asked of them based on the results we want them to have. And then when they go out and attempt to do it, they're more likely to coordinate or at least go towards some pattern that looks like what we're asking them to do.
But you don't think that if you told them, hey, you're doing this underhook wrong, here's what you should be doing correctly.
Because
you don't think that correcting somebody when they're doing something incorrect is the right thing.
Correct is not idealized. That's the big problem you guys are understanding.
I'm not.
So what do you consider correct? If somebody's doing something, okay,
effective.
All right, let me rephrase that. If you see one of your students doing something ineffectively, you don't think that correcting them would be the most intelligent thing for you to do as an instructor?
I need to give them an opportunity that's low enough in difficulty for them to get it themselves. That's what scaling is. And so what's interesting is we try to use words to do that. So we think that by telling somebody this is the idealized pattern, we're helping them. But when this is put up to scrutiny, we're not actually helping them, because what they're now what you're doing is you're manipulating their attention. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that the way words manipulate attention can either have a performance increase or a performance decrement. So anytime we talk about an idealized solution, like this is the perfect technique, we see performance decrements immediately. And another thing that we see is we see an internal view of what's possible. So we end up taking that attention and shifting it from external to themselves to internal towards themselves, which also creates a performance decrement. But if we use language that's results-based and that's focusing them externally to themselves based on the effect we want them to have,
But
performance goes up.
But you're talking about something being results-based. People doing techniques, I'm not going to say correctly, people doing techniques more effectively, that's not results-based for you?
It's performance-based.
Okay.
So what? So would we?
But good performance isn't a good result for you?
It is a good result.
So then it's results-based.
No, results are first. When you try to educate attention towards performance and education towards results, it's harder for us to pick it up. So we can't see performance changes as clearly as we can see results. So result-focused training is a better
the better
feedback.
the better your performance gets, the better your results get.
Well,
if you're performing better, you're doing better.
I'm sorry. So again, this is another problem. I'm using words that have clear definitions in the literature that you're unaware of. So I'm not talking about performance and results and the colloquial understanding of them. What I'm talking about is results are, I got the underhook.
No, I think Dan's talking about results are when they're out there winning gold medals.
No,
that means their performance as well.
Yes, so that's okay. You're jumping. I'm not saying results like, oh, I'm a champion. I'm saying we're learning. So when I go into a room to practice, what do I need to focus on? What is going to enhance my ability to gain a new skill? Is it going to be focusing on the results of what I'm trying to do, or focusing on the performance of what I'm trying to do?
100%. Winning is a consequence of performance and results.
You don't think that having somebody there to tell you, this is what has been working, this is what has been refined over years and years. Jiu-jitsu's gotten better since it first came out. Jiu-jitsu came from judo. It's gotten better over time.
Right, but we all agree.
That's because our technique got better. Our technique got more refined.
No, that's an assumption you were making.
It's not an assumption.
Yes, it is.
I think that's a fact.
It is not a fact.
So you're telling me jiu-jitsu hasn't gotten better since it first came out?
Do you know what elite performers bring to the table for new learners that are coming along?
Many years of experience.
No, but what do they really offer the new learner?
Their knowledge.
The knowledge.
The knowledge of what?
Whatever you're looking to learn, right?
A new learner.
Knowledge of jiu-jitsu.
A new learner has never touched a body before. How does an elite person's experience transfer to somebody who's never touched a body before?
Then why is it that some teams have constant people,
well, we can talk about that.
Champions after champions? How? So, because they hopefully the elite performer understands what jiu-jitsu is. I understand my body is not the same as everybody else's, right? So I love the half guard, but not everybody has to love the half guard. But I'm going to understand the berimbolo. I'm going to experience.
Listen to me. Listen to what I'm asking you. How does an elite performer's success and understanding and skill transfer down to a person who has never touched a body?
I just told you their experience that they have, their real life experience that they have.
All right.
And dealing with every situation.
I've never touched a body. How do I get that knowledge?
We teach you. We tell you what to do.
So you're saying that you telling me is the central mechanism that we see.
No, showing you.
Increase in skill over time.
It depends. Are you a kinesthetic learner? Hold on. Are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you an auditory learner? What are you? We have to develop that relationship between you. What is that? Where have I been so wrong? Then explain to me that, because I keep saying experience.
No, for sure.
How is it transferred?
I'm giggling not because you're saying something stupid, but this is the problem with this conversation.
Well, just tell us how the knowledge. But you're not, though. You're saying what the problem is. So please do.
We have to define the problem first, and then we can get to why it's a problem. So the central problem in this conversation is that neither of you guys have an informed opinion.
I just gave you my opinion.
Yeah.
Tell us How does an elite performer transfer knowledge? You tell us, please.
They give the new learner an opportunity to start where they now know to be effective regions of space to start engaging in the behavior.
Yes, experience, because you've been there before.
So it's not what you tell them.
It's what you show them.
It's the opportunities you create for them to act out onto the world. So let's imagine that you spent 20 years gripping us one way, you knew this is not right. Okay.
You're saying to start in positions that we've been in before. Half guard's been around forever. The constraint positions that you're telling us to work out of have been there forever. But what hasn't been there forever is the technique that's been refined over years and years and years. There's so many better ways. If we look at the way that people finished arm bars 10 years ago, it's different than the way people finish arm bars today. It's probably going to be different than the way people finish it in 10 years.
Wait,
so
do you know? Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
What were you going to say? No. Everybody deserves to speak, so I want to hear what you have to say.
It's different because the context is different.
The context is different. Somebody starts off in an armbar position, right? The same position which you start off in an armbar is probably roughly the same. Like, okay, you start on somebody's back. It's better because there's so many different kinds of arm bars, right? Start on somebody's back. You have both hooks in. You have control hand covering strangle hand, right? There's so many better ways of doing it as the time goes on. So many better ways of attacking the back. Why is it that we have to start at square zero rather than be like, hey, these are the most effective things that work at competition. This is the thing which has won world championships. This is the things which the best guys are using. Here's how you should do it, rather than trying to figure it out yourself, because those world champions have spent so many years refining that and making it better. Why is that completely how do I say it? Why is it completely thrown away?
It's not.
But if you're saying it's not, right? Why wouldn't I show somebody who doesn't know something out of that position? Why wouldn't I teach that to them and be like, hey, now it's time for you to put this into practice?
Okay. There is an effect that you have on learners by showing them things. There is an effect that you have on learners by saying things to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you should do both.
These effects,
you should show them, and you should show them. You should let them feel it. You should let them try it, and you should correct them on things that they were doing wrong.
These effects have been studied, so we know.
Jiu-jitsu?
Please stop saying that. We
can talk about body is, but they're saying body is body. Real quick, so let me just ask you one thing.
I just have to answer. I really want to answer this question. And you can go hard as long as you want.
Not going hard. Go ahead.
Showing somebody something has an effect. Saying something to somebody has an effect. People doing things have an effect. It is very important as coaches that we understand the effect of our interventions. So as we gain this knowledge of through our own experience, we also gain knowledge about. We gain a greater knowledge of what's possible from being in a system over a period of time. And then if we decide to become instructors, we can take this knowledge about and we can help it. You can use it to help inform practice. Like you're saying, hey, we know how arm locks work this way. So we start new learners in situations that we know to be highly effective, and we start their learning there. But what we say to them and what we show to them, we have to be careful, because it's not just the saying and showing that's doing the transfer. There's other things that are going on that we need to consider as coaches, that we need to control for, so that we can take the stuff we've learned and we can apply it to this new learner. But if we don't know what those are, we don't know what we are doing. And you know what the irony that you guys can't seem to see here is, you're actually arguing my point for jiu-jitsu. You're saying, dude, how can somebody without knowledge do something like this? And I'm saying, if you don't know how to coach, if you don't know how coaching works, how behavior works, how can you manipulate it?
But I agree. I think you're just saying it in different words. Like in 2017, we had an athlete. We were the first time we had an athlete in ADCC in every weight class, and we trained together all the time. We had people in every single weight class, and we did everything. We did positional training. We did constraint training. We did a lot of drilling too. And I one thing we'll just never agree. I hear what you're saying, but I do believe that there is a complete wrong way to do things. We all must adjust according to our body type and our style. I'm going to have a different game than Dan. You're going to have a different game than me. But I do believe there is a better way. And I think I think it's been proven. You know, like, again, I was sitting with Marcelo the other day. He's been drilling his whole life.
That doesn't,
You know, I
that,
mean,
look,
I don't know, man.
that is not evidence of anything other than
But
Marcelo
neither
drills.
there's no evidence here. I mean, there's evidence on both sides. Like what you've
Both,
done has been
both
successful.
sides of what?
Both sides of of what we're talking about, from where we're coming from, where you're coming from. There's evidence in jiu-jitsu of performance being superior the way we've been doing it.
Look, this is what we know. Over time, we gain knowledge about something. If we can find an effective way to transfer that knowledge to new students, they learn at a faster rate. If we can get more people engaged in an activity over time, we have more potential outcomes because we have more bodies engaging. Stuff goes up over time. When we get better scaling, we get better equipment, we get better like visual stuff. We can see people all over the world doing it. All these things contribute to the rise in skill. Danaher is a very intelligent man who can clearly see what's happening. He's been coaching for 40 or 30 years. He's able to convince a bunch of highly motivated people to come to him and exist in a room under his guidance. That alone is stronger than any drilling he has you guys do. That alone could describe almost everything that you just said as the reason for having success.
What do you mean?
So his understanding and just maybe saying, hey, you might want to grab both legs because it makes it more difficult for people to get off the ground. Just that suggestion, because we know it to be true, it's physically certain that if we bind people's legs together, they don't move that well. And we focus all of our attention around creating those opportunities for ourselves, we're going to get better at doing it. So it's not the drilling it statically that helps it. It's not the obsessive detail-oriented shit we like to tell ourselves that does it. It's knowing that as a possibility and being given the opportunity to develop it into a skill. And doing it in a room with very resistant and highly motivated individuals that have the same goals as you. That's a very strong mixture for success.
I believe resistance has to vary. I believe sometimes it has to be 50% resistant, sometimes 100% resistant. I believe we're just 100% resistant all the time. Again, how do you explain basketball players shooting free throws, practicing without in a scrimmage? What is that? Is that something completely different?
Can I say something to Greg?
Hold on. Could you explain that? Like Kobe and Jordan getting there 3 hours before the game and just shooting. Is that not effective?
No.
It's not?
No.
It's not effective.
So Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan getting to the game 3 hours before the game like they always did, shooting thousands of shots was not effective for them.
And why were they so good?
I disagree. I disagree.
You
But listen,
would have to literally control for everything.
Hold on. I got to run to my kids' conference.
Stay on.
It's been real. God bless you guys. Thank you again. I wasn't looking to debate. I just wanted to talk, man. Like I really don't care what anyone does. As long as you're having fun, you're bringing people in, or people are enjoying themselves.
Cool, man. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it, man.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Tom. All right, Greg. Looks like we could finally have a conversation.
Yeah, man. Let's do it. Let's continue.
Right, so,
you can start off wherever you want.
Here's my thing, right? You brought up the thing about Danaher, correct? About how sorry, let me just put something over here. You brought up the fact that Danaher, one of the best things that he's done is he's put so many good people in a room together, correct? And I do agree with that because I have such amazing training partners. I train with such good people, and they give me the best reactions, right? Roger Gracie made it to a world title without any training partners. He only trained with blue belts.
That's amazing. That's
because he had so many years of knowledge of training. If Hodger wasn't learning so much from his instructor, do you really think that him only training with blue belts would have been such a good thing?
I really want to engage with you on that topic based on why you're asking it. But the problem is you're starting off with a massive assumption. You're committing a huge. It's called begging the question. All right, you're assuming your conclusion in your premise, and you're not offering any evidence for why you're saying that. So
the evidence is that Hodger was one of the best who's ever done it.
But that's not evidence of method. Do you understand?
It is more than enough of an evidence of method because his method clearly worked.
No, but you're not understanding, man. You have to investigate these things more deeply than just man did this, therefore I do this. Dude, if it was that easy, we just copy the greats and we become great ourselves. But that's not the case.
But we do model our games off of the greats and what they do to make ourselves better. So is that not the case?
when we watch elite performers,
Yeah.
we pick up their affordances. This is a great guide for how we might want to behave, but it's not a cognitive thing. It's something else.
How's it not cognitive learning technique?
It's relational. So
Okay.
that's what I'm saying in the beginning. See, you're assuming an information processing view of the world. And this is what's even more interesting about this conversation. You don't even have a theoretical framework nor any experimental evidence that you're offering me for this view.
But
You were literally just
we have plenty of experimental evidence and plenty of world champions.
But
all the
that
world
is not,
all of the world champ if as a competitive athlete, I want the absolute best thing for myself as a competitor. And one of the best things that's ever been offered to me was Danaher telling me what to do and what not to do. It's true, because
I know. I remember.
you said that on your video where you were shitting on buying a Danaher DVD. I'm gonna save you $400, right?
I'll tell you what I was shitting on. It wasn't Danner's DVD, but keep going.
But instructionals, right? You said that, okay, you only need to do this, this, and this, inside position, outside position, hybrid positions. Each one of those things have such distinct subsystems, their pros and cons and everything, that if you didn't have somebody to teach that to you, you would have never learned it. It's almost like, yes, sure, and maybe if it took you an absolute unbelievable amount of time for me to learn everything just through live training. What's up?
You're not hearing your own irony, buddy. You're saying you couldn't have learned it without someone telling you something. So the first person to learn something, who told them?
You know, that's the thing, is you're never going to know who the first person is who learned something, but what we do know is what's going on today. Okay. What's going on today is that somebody is teaching you what to do correctly and what to do incorrectly.
Do you know what an infinite regress is? Or turtles all the way down, or the chicken or the egg?
Why don't you explain it in simpler words for the 1,000 people watching?
You need knowledge to learn, because
your
instructor offers that.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that.
Okay. So then your instructor gained knowledge from somebody else, and then your instructor gains knowledge, and you go all the way back. When does it stop?
When does it stop?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know my entire lineage for however many thousands of years that martial arts have been around.
I'm making a deeper point. It's called circular reasoning. Okay, you're basically using knowledge to explain knowledge, but you have to first tell me where the first bit of knowledge came from. And so what's interesting enough is J.J. Gibson, who is the guy who came up with the idea of the ecological approach and direct perception. That was the problem he was trying to solve. So if we assume that information is indirect and we have to create a mental model, we're doing exactly that. We're explaining knowledge with knowledge. So we have to first ask, if we need a representation in the brain, where did the representation of that come from? How do we start representing before we're representing?
Here's what I'm saying. You don't think that having somebody with unbelievable knowledge on a sport telling you what works and what works isn't a good word for you, what's effective and what isn't effective, you don't think that that's good for you? I
do think it's good for you.
But you said that you think it's not good. But if they're telling you techniques which are effective and techniques which aren't effective,
okay.
Have you ever seen somebody, white belt, blue belt, do some stupid shit?
Yeah, I see beginners do stupid shit all the time.
I see beginners do stupid shit all the time, right? Yep. Do they know that they're doing stupid shit? No, of course not.
It depends.
They don't know. If you, as an instructor, with your knowledge, tell them that they're doing something stupid, rather than having them figure it out, because they could keep on doing that.
Figure it out, man. Listen, let me give you, please. You guys are misinterpreting it because you're not doing the reading, my man. Like, you're basically taking these assumptions, these emotional responses, these all this anecdotal evidence and all your feelings and all your everything, and you're applying it to the whole world. You're not going through the same rigor, using the same standard of evidence that I am. We are using two different standards of evidence.
The evidence is that this works at the highest level.
It is.
It doesn't work at the highest level, the stuff that's working right now.
I know what's working because you can see it everywhere. It's across the board.
Yeah.
What's working is that you have and again, I want to get more specific because, dude, this is turning into a conversation about logical fallacy and standard of evidence. We're not even getting to the point. And the part of the problem we can't get to the point is you do not have a position to argue from. What you're doing
is you're a position to argue from.
Stop. and this is not an insult. You can look it up after we're done, but you're arguing from a position of ignorance. You're saying,
Position of ignorance.
yes, it actually means something. I'm not calling you ignorant. What I'm saying is
that. In what way am I being ignorant where I'm competing at the highest level of the sport and I know what works and what doesn't work?
You don't know what works and what doesn't work.
But
you
then why
don't have
am I
access to that?
I don't have access to the best instructor in the world.
No, that's not what I'm saying, my man.
That is what you're saying.
Me.
You're saying that I don't know what works and what doesn't work. Clearly, I know what works and what doesn't work. Why are the best guys in the world?
Can you do something? Can you do something for me real quick?
I'll do it. Yeah, what's up?
Okay, can you hold up one of your arms and can you bend it at 39 degrees?
Why do you want me to?
I'm going to prove a point. Can you show the crowd 39 degrees and your arm? Just bend it.
I don't understand the point you're getting at. Can you please?
I'm going to make the point. Can you do it for me right now?
I don't know exactly what 39 degrees looks like.
Exactly. Nobody has access to that. We don't have a metric by which we can measure performance. By performance, I mean, like say at joint angle. So even you doing something as simple as bending your arm, you have no access to measurements to specific degrees. You bend your arm at whatever degree you bend it relative to the task you're performing.
But you're saying that I have you're saying that I have no way of measuring performance, but the performance is what works at the highest level. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right?
Listen to me, man.
I'm listening.
What I mean is this. A result is, here's an example of result. Dan, bend your arm. You can do that easily, right?
Yeah, of course I can bend.
You're right. Okay, that's knowledge of result. So I can ask you to do something. You can say, oh, I bent it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But if I say, Dan, bend your arm at 39 degrees, you can't do that.
What does that have to do with jiu-jitsu?
Okay, so when you're describing a technique to somebody, you're saying, okay, you need to put your hands here at this angle for this reason at this time. Those are performance values. We don't have access to time metrics like you think they do with the word you're describing. Timing is a relationship value. So when we act or when we perform something is relative to the timing and when it's available. We can't access the concept of time as a performance measure from static drilling. We must try to perform it live, and it's the effective outcome. And what's really interesting is we could take someone who does a double leg, right? So we could say that Jordan Burroughs has the perfect double leg. Let's just imagine, right? Now,
the perfect double leg for him.
Okay, wait. If we watch Jordan Burroughs do a double leg, okay, on somebody who's just standing there, and we watched his kinematics, we watched how the body moved, and then we said, okay, you have to do this against a resisting opponent, go. And we measured that.
How did Jordan
Wait. I'm going to make a point to you, please.
Okay.
And if we did it again, we said, hey, you have to do this in 30 seconds. Each time I changed the performance value, we would get a different movement.
Okay.
The double leg would look different each time. Not because he knows exactly what a double leg needs to look like in 30 seconds performance time or in 6 minutes or statically. You move relative to the context in which you're asked. So what we see happening is there's a relationship between your capacity to do something and the information that you're using to do it. That's the only way we can gain performance values. We can't get them just out of the air, like, oh, just like I'm asking you now, bend your arm 39 degrees. But if I found a task that required 39 degrees of measurement, I could probably get you to do it without you knowing you're doing it, based on just giving you the result I want.
Greg, how do you think Jordan Burroughs learned how to do a double leg? He drilled it.
No.
And somebody taught it to him.
He learned how to do a double leg by trying to go to both people's legs. That's how he learned how to do it.
Okay. And how did he get to both people's legs? By drilling it?
No. By wrestling.
Okay. And wrestling is also drilling.
Wait.
Why do so many wrestlers drill and drill and drill? Why don't wrestlers just go live all the time?
They're not sure what's causing the change. So they use
traditional. What you're saying is the people which compete at the highest level don't know what works.
Correct.
Do you think that as a competitor we haven't tried everything to get better? You think?
No,
your idea of constraint-based learning, I'm not disagreeing with it.
Well, you don't know what it is. You can't disagree with it. You're not sure what it is.
So no. But working out of certain positions is great, but you need to be taught technique.
Do not.
You do need to learn technique.
I'm proving it right now.
You're proving that you don't need to learn technique.
Well, the way, okay, you're defining that. You're saying this is a technique. The way I view technique and the way you view technique are very two different things. I need to get my students to perform effective movement outcomes. So like one would be passing somebody's legs. I couldn't care less how my students pass people's legs unless they can do it effectively. So what we do to create an opportunity to pass legs effectively is we constrain the environment, we constrain the task, and we center these two things around the invariant nature of how people pass legs. Because no matter how you do it, through, over, under, around, backflip, there's something that's similar across the board for every person who's ever passed legs. And we use the historical record of that to search for and find invariants. And then we focus our students' attention on those and get the results we want.
Greg, what you're saying is that you couldn't care less about how your students pass the legs as long as they pass the legs. But what if you, as an instructor, knew a more effective way of doing it? Something that works better, something that they're like, oh, I didn't see this. You don't think that it would be good?
Define more. Can you please define more effective for me? So
things that work better in live training, things that work better in competitions, things that
give me
work
an
better.
example of what you're saying.
I am.
No. Specifically.
Okay.
What's better than passing legs?
Passing. Okay. What's better than, I'm sure that there's plenty of things that are better than passing legs. What I'm just saying is that there's certain, okay, let's talk about Toriando passing. Let's talk about passing legs when we're in different kinds of guards. There's a million ways to do that.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree.
I know that too. And do you want to know why? Because I was taught those techniques and then I drilled them. And then after that, I used them in live training and then I use that in competition.
Okay, wait, stop. Just
People
answer my question.
Always.
You said that isn't it better to know how to pass legs better? So what I'm asking you, what's better than passing legs?
Okay. If we're working on Toriando passing, right? You have to put your feet in certain positions. You have to put your head in a certain position. What happens if you just put something in a fundamentally wrong position, but it's working for you?
Well, there is no such thing.
You know that it's fundamentally wrong, and your partner or your opponent doesn't know that there's something fundamentally wrong.
There's no such thing as fundamentally wrong if it fulfills the demands of the task.
So you'd say that crossing your ankles on the back isn't fundamentally wrong?
No. And John Danner would say.
Okay. So if I'm on somebody's back,
yep.
Okay, yep. I'm sure that we've all been taught this Jiu-Jitsu 101. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but if I cross my ankles on somebody's back, what's going to happen?
Wait, I'm going to answer that real quick.
Okay.
Wait, I'm going to answer right now. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Gordon Ryan, we have a mutual friend. So he dropped his friend off at my gym and we gave him some tools to fix his truck. And he was like, hey, I really appreciate your help. You want some money? We're like, nah, dude, it's cool. He's like, hey, come to my seminar. I'm doing one in Maryland. Me and John Danner, you come in for free. I was like, bet. Came to the seminar, did the whole thing with everybody. Someone asked that exact question. They were like, John, should I cross my legs when I'm behind somebody because I'm getting tapped? What should I do about it? Do you know what his answer was? Kill yourself. He said, if you get your ankles broken by crossing them, kill yourself.
That's hilarious.
But anyway,
that's just Danaher.
I love it because the point is, there's nothing wrong with crossing your ankles. There's nothing wrong with it.
And getting submitted when you're on somebody's back in a super dominant position when you could have not gotten submitted. You're
assuming that crossing the ankles has a direct correlative effect with getting submitted. It doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Not being aware of the dangers of doing anything. Do you know Jordan Burroughs shoots the most perfect double leg, right? But you know it gets countered sometimes. So are we going to say that there's a more perfect technique?
Just because something gets countered doesn't mean that it's not a perfect technique. There's so much that goes into it.
That's exactly the point I'm making, buddy.
Yeah.
If I cross my legs around and you get submitted, it doesn't mean it's fundamentally wrong. It means I wasn't prepared for the task demands. When I cross my ankles, a new possibility is emerging.
But it does, because if you didn't cross your ankles, you wouldn't have gotten your shit cracked.
But other things can happen too.
Yeah,
so
but
imagine
a direct cause and correlation is I cross my ankles on somebody's back and then I end up getting submitted off of something stupid. If I had an instructor who taught me, hey, maybe that's not correct, you don't think that's better off for you?
No.
Just because somebody
I don't.
counters a takedown doesn't mean that the person's wrestling is wrong. And then again, we're talking about skill acquisition. Jordan drilled that technique.
Dan, listen, buddy, I don't want to irritate the people that are watching this, but this conversation is just it's crazy. And the reason the conversation is crazy is because I know that you think you have evidence. I do. I know you think that. I know you really do, but you don't.
How do I not have evidence?
If you don't understand behavior, where it comes from, why it is what it is, how the brain is functioning in the body and how it's functioning in the environment, and what intervention we need to use to get behavior to emerge, then you literally don't know anything about why behavior is what it is. And you know what? That's okay. Your only job is to go out there and grab people and beat the fuck out of them. And you're good at that.
Okay.
But you do not understand behavior at a fundamental level, even anywhere close to it. And that's okay. You've never studied it. All you've ever done is learn how to do the thing that you want to be good at. And you got good at it by doing it. That's all we know.
And how did I get good at it?
I'm asking that same question.
Okay,
so this is what you think. You're just choosing the thing. You're just saying, oh, it was definitely the drilling. That was it. But when they've done study,
I'm not saying that it's just drilling. I think that drilling was a huge component of it.
Right. You think that, but you didn't control for it. So you don't know if that was the cause. Human behavior is a non-linear system. We do not know which inputs cause which outputs. We do not have access to that. We operate in a gray, fuzzy area with no right angles. And so the best we can do is a probabilistic guess based on something that we've seen happen in the past. And the goal is to try to constrain it to see if it comes out again. We've been doing that ever since. So the only thing that coaches can do is constrain. And we've been manipulating them since the beginning of time. But the knowledge of how these constraints interact is what we're now discovering. And that's exciting because now we actually have knowledge about what we might want to do in the face of these mysterious constraints.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you need somebody to teach you what to do. You don't need somebody to teach you.
You don't. I'm not saying that you don't need guidance. I'm not saying that you don't need a room with some opportunity to learn. What I'm saying is traditional view of what teaching is incorrect.
But then why is it working?
Because people do things and things come out when people do things.
And you think that having somebody teach you something has no value whatsoever.
It depends on what you mean and how you're intervening as a teacher. So there are interventions that we use as teachers that are either more or less effective. So verbal instruction and static drilling or decontextual, I'm not gonna say static, decontextualized drilling are two of the least effective interventions that we can use. And this is being shown through experimentation, not theory, but experimentation. That's all.
So you don't think that jiu-jitsu has very specific systems in place that work at the highest level?
I don't know what you mean by, see, when I hear systems, what I hear is a person doing tasks in an environment relative to the demands that are being asked of them. So when I see system, I hear the floor, I hear your training partners, I hear your previous athletic experience, I hear your emotions, your culture, your psychology. I don't think of systems as being just a step-by-step technique strung together in one specific way. That is an aspect of the system, but that's not the system.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying.
I hear you, buddy, and you're having a hard time because you don't know what any of this is.
Of course I know what this is. I do this for a living.
You grapple for a living.
I also teach for a living.
You show moves for a living.
Yes, I show moves that work.
For you.
Okay, so Danaher is my instructor. Danaher is crippled. Danaher has however many surgeries on his leg. He can't completely straighten his leg.
I know, I know Danaher very well.
You know John very well, okay? Does John only show me moves that works for him?
No, because John Danaher has a lot of things going for him. One of his strongest positions is he's had eyes on moving bodies for a long time.
So
And
would you say that he knows technique because he's had eyes
when you
on?
say that he knows technique, I don't know what you mean when you say that.
You don't know what it means when Danaher knows technique.
I don't know what you mean when you say that.
Okay, what do you think I mean when I say that? John clearly
That
knows
there is,
what he's
okay,
talking
I'm gonna
about.
say that there is an idealized way to do something.
Okay, that's true. There is an idealized way of doing
I disagree.
something. You disagree that there are
Correct.
certain ways of doing things.
No. I know that we want a specific outcome, but I know that to get this specific outcome, we have to allow for variation. This big gray area of things that don't always add up, but we still get the same outcomes. When we study movement from the earliest level to the highest level, we see this being the case. When somebody says, oh yeah, when I was out there, I was using these grips, and then they film them, that's not what they were doing. So this idealized technique is nowhere to be found in reality. It's in our heads. We're telling ourselves a story.
You're saying that proper technique, idealized technique, is nowhere to be found in reality.
Yes, I'm saying the only thing that we can call proper is whatever is effective.
Yes,
Whatever
and whatever works
solution.
at the highest level. And we can know that there's certain sets of techniques that work at the highest level.
It's not a set of techniques that work at the highest level.
It's not?
So there is variation in things that are effective and ineffective. Within that scope of variation, there are many different ways that something can happen. Like, you want to hear something interesting? Maybe you'll appreciate this. When they look at movement patterns of beginners are more consistent than movement patterns of advanced athletes. Can you explain why that's the case? So what I mean is,
what they're doing, they're all fucking up.
No, listen. When beginners do something, they're very consistent.
Consistently fucking up.
No. They're consistent whenever movement they do.
Yeah.
But when elite athletes move, they are highly variable.
Yeah, because they all learn the same thing, roughly the same thing that's correct, and then they adapt it for themselves. But if they were never taught that, they would have never gotten good.
How can something be correct? How can something be an ideal and adaptive at the same time? If something is ideal, why does it change?
Because people's bodies are different.
So then there's no ideal technique.
So then if you're saying that there's no ideal technique, how are you going to say that there's no ideal technique?
I'm saying is that you're claiming it is. Okay, so other people claim this too. It's not just you. Like a tennis player is like, oh, there's the perfect arm swing. So when they look at all the elite players, they all have different arm swings. So if they're all high-level players and all their arm swings are different, there's no idealized arm swing. Okay. There's just an effective arm swing.
Okay. So you're saying that every player has a different arm swing, correct?
Correct.
But there's certain aspects of that that have the same common denominator. Okay, yes, but even though it's different, right? I don't know anything about fucking throwing a baseball, but I assume you probably have to throw your hips into it, and you have to turn your foot on the floor when you do it. I don't know anything about. I've never played a sport in my life.
I know. Keep going.
Okay, but would you agree that there's certain aspects of a technique to throwing a baseball?
I would.
That are all the same.
Absolutely.
So then that just goes to show the fact that there's technique to everything you do. And that if you're saying that there's no proper technique to anything, but everybody's technique is slightly different, somebody throwing a baseball, if they didn't have a guided instruction to teach them, you should do A, B, C, and D, they would never throw a baseball as effective.
That you're just saying that.
Okay.
What's the evidence you have to say that?
What's the evidence I have to say that people who all throw a baseball roughly do the same thing?
Freeze. When people throw baseballs, there's what's called an invariant feature to throwing a ball that must be done. If the amount of variation that we see in a movement is ineffective, the ball doesn't get thrown. But there's an amount of variation that exists in an action that can exist, and we can still get consistent outcomes. So every time that elite pitcher throws a ball, he does it slightly differently every time because things change. So as he gets fatigued, his arm swing changes.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. But you don't think that pitcher had somebody with years and years of experience teach them how to throw a ball?
Do you know that one of the the researcher that I read about who designs practices for, and a lot of the researchers I've talked to who are actually working in Major League Baseball, they don't play baseball. They don't play baseball. But
so then what do?
They understand human behavior and they understand why it happens. So they're able to constrain these high level players who are having these movement problems. They're able to solve them because they understand behavior. That's it. They never played.
Okay. I have a feeling that jiu-jitsu is quite a bit different than baseball, and the skill cap for jiu-jitsu is a lot more different than baseball.
What's the difference? What's the difference between baseball and jiu-jitsu as the sport? What's the difference?
Jiu-jitsu is a very, very skill-based sport.
You think baseball's not?
I think that it has a lower skill cap and it's more on physical. Same with stuff like football.
I wouldn't. We could debate the skill cap thing, but that's not what's different about them.
So then you're going to tell me that somebody who knows more technique than another person, why do we have belts then? White, blue, purple, brown, black.
What?
What I'm saying is that the person with more technique in jiu-jitsu tends to be better than the person who doesn't, if the physical constraints are the same.
Well, let me ask you a simple question. I'm going to play this game with you because I don't know how else to talk to you in a meaningful way where we can agree to terms. But so two things. So I'll make 2 points real quick. One, you can't say in the same sentence that there's an ideal and then that there's variation. Those are two different things. Okay?
So,
because ideal means one way, variation means many ways. So those are contradictory statements. So just let me point that out. And then let me give you some athletes that are of note, right? So J-Rod and Nicky Rod.
Yeah.
They probably couldn't give two fucks about drilling technique. But those guys perform at a high level very early in their career. Very early. J-Rod with only a few years of training, won ADCC trials. That's crazy.
So, but here's the thing. Do you don't think that J-Rod, he had years of wrestling before him? He wasn't drilling wrestling beforehand to learn wrestling?
So they're different sports, buddy.
Okay, well, wrestling and jiu-jitsu is pretty similar.
It's a different sport. Physics are the same, but the sport's different.
Okay, well, they're both grappling. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is he learned how to drill it. And then they ended up...
Have you ever heard him talk about Danaher and them? Have you ever heard her actually talk on their podcast? They joke. They're like, dude, we used to hide in the corner. We didn't want to drill. We hated it. And they joke. They're like, we can't get J-Rod to drill anything. And Craig Jones always says, he's like, man, it's so irritating. I show J-Rod something once and he can do it immediately. He doesn't have to try. So how do you explain that with your model?
Man, how do you explain every single person who competes at the highest level doing that? Just because it works for somebody. And listen, I don't know the intricacies of what J-Rod does. And frankly, I don't want to talk about, super specific people. But I'm talking about
super specific. You said Marcelo, you said Hodger. Why can't I bring up my super specific people?
Because I'm bringing up everything that happens as a whole. Let's talk about the top 10 in every weight division.
Okay, so this is your argument. So let me just point to this. What the top 10 do, because they're the top 10, justifies all the methods they use to get there.
Well, obviously, because they're the best at the sport.
In the 1930s, when basketball first came out, there were top 10 teams, right? Right?
And I'm sure that basketball in the 1930s, basketball from today is way better than the basketball in the 1930s.
But wait, if we used your argument, and this was the 1930s, and I was like, hey, man, I don't think we're training this sport right. And you're like, no, dude, these 10 basketball players are the best ever. So if we don't do what they did, we'll never get to where they are.
Well,
so you actually hamstring the future by putting us now here in the moment and saying this moment justifies future activities.
No, because I believe that technique constantly evolves over time and gets better and better.
So then freeze. That's also contradictory. You said there's an idealized technique. If you're performing the idealized technique, how can it get any better?
Because technique evolves over time.
How can an idealized movement evolve? How can it get better if it's already ideal?
How did we get to an idealized movement? By learning.
When is it ideal? Wait. If the champions of the 1930s had the ideal technique, and you now in 2025 have the ideal technique, who had the ideal technique?
How does that apply to the ecological approach?
Well, because the ecological approach doesn't argue for ideal technique. What they argue for is effective movement outcomes. So what they argue for is that there is natural variation in the human movement system.
I agree.
And that this natural variation is functional. What this natural variation does is allows the system to be adaptable. So as the system faces perturbations like fatigue, stress, urgency, the system has adapted to this variation so that those perturbations don't affect the outcome as greatly. Now, what happens is if you over-constrain a system and you remove its natural variation, that movement becomes brittle. So if any variation, any novelty, or any perturbations enter that system, the movement no longer functions as effective. That's what they claim. And then the evidence.
Nobody's restricting your technique.
Stop it. Look, there is just effective technique, Dan. You're saying you don't look. Do you realize you're contradicting yourself? Do you realize that?
I'm not contradicting myself whatsoever.
Okay, so give me the definition of ideal.
Something that works at the highest level in jiu-jitsu. An ideal, what works in jiu-jitsu? It's something that works at the highest level.
Give me the definition of ideal. So it's just something that works at the highest level?
In the context of jiu-jitsu?
No. Why is high-level jiu-jitsu different than high-level tennis? Like, high-level tennis is far more competitive than high-level jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Look.
But the people which are doing tennis, imagine going to play tennis. Let's say we just gave somebody a racquetball.
Okay.
Or whatever the fucking thing is they used to hit it.
Yeah.
Right? And just said, okay, go play tennis. Rather than tell them, but let me talk.
That's not what we're doing.
But let me talk. And then you tell them that this is what, but this is the thing. You guys try to pull out straw man over and over again. I'm changing it, but it's the reality of what is going on.
Buddy, listen. We don't tell people to go on the mat and grab each other and learn grappling. That's not what we do.
You put them in very specific situations, but you should also learn them technique, because technique constantly grows and evolves over time. You're saying that there's an ideal way of doing things, right? But you also have to realize that technique grows and evolves, and there's a bigger knowledge. Because let's say something, maybe there's a certain way of finishing a rear naked strangle, right? That's been the same way of finishing it for a while, and people have figured that out. But technique grows. We constantly discover new and new technique that gets passed on to generations over time. Everything that's ever been done.
If the technique currently is ideal, how do new techniques emerge if we already have the ideal ones?
Because you research them and you keep on figuring out what works due to different things which you see.
That's exactly what I'm saying is happening, and you're saying it's something else.
I'm saying that you should teach that to your students. Greg, I'm sure that in your head you have some sort of a way that this is the best way of isolating arms from the back and going into a rear naked strangle, and you teach that to a student, and then you say, okay, this is how you should start isolating an arm to go for a strangle, rather than just putting them in these very specific positions.
I'll tell you what I
wouldn't you need tactical knowledge to be able to teach that?
You need having knowledge about something, or just declarative knowledge about a subject, is not wrong to have. It's not bad to have.
Yeah, of course not.
We collect data over time, and we can learn more about the nature of the things that we do. The question is how do we use that knowledge about to get someone to gain knowledge of? And knowledge of is defined as your own experience in something. So it's simple like this. I could tell you what it feels like to pick up a cup, something as simple as that. But the only way that you know how hard you have to grab it to hold it is by grabbing it and holding it. Like, I can tell you 1,000 different things about the shape of the human hand and the shape of the cylinder and cups, and I could tell you everything in the world about it. But none of that gets you to how you should want to grab it and hold it and pick it up. So even something as simple as that. So what you're saying is that just through verbal intervention, you're able to fix all the problems that exist and getting something to behavior to emerge based on the. Of course
not. That's not. No,
because you are saying
we use our voice. We use
that's
showing
verbal,
them technique.
Voice is verbal, buddy.
What? I can hear you.
Your voice is verbal.
Yeah, I know. I say you use verbal. You use showing them with your hands by the way it feels.
Correct.
By the way it feels, by the way that they see it, by the way that they feel it, all of those things.
Absolutely, you're all necessary.
Of course they are. But I'm not disagreeing on that. But I'm also saying that I know that because I know the technique behind it.
Dan, you can't know something before you know something.
Because somebody taught it to me.
Wait. Let's try again. Let's try another way. When a beginner does something for the first time,
Okay.
whether they static drill or they do it live, what's usually the first thing that happens when they do it? They do it wrong, right?
Yeah, and then you have an instructor.
Okay, wait.
Tell them how to do it correctly.
Wait. Do wrong things turn into right things?
Do wrong things?
Yeah.
No, because they're wrong. You're telling them to do something different.
So if the majority of the actions we take to get from having no skill to skill, majority of it's wrong because we need to get to effective skill. So in the attempt to get effective, most of what we do from start to effective is a failure. So imagine we failed 6 times before we got our first win. So all those actions were taken before that first win were wrong, yet they led to a win. So if wrongness is wrong to do and it doesn't infer any learning opportunity, then how does a beginner ever get out of beginner land? Because
A beginner gets out of beginner land because when he does stuff wrong, he has an instructor that tells him what's correct to do.
But you don't go from doing it wrong to doing it correct. That's not a jump we make. So even in your model, let's say, okay, your student is doing a sumo gaishi from the butterfly guard, right? And you see them do it and it's wrong. And you go over there and correct them. Do they do that right? Do they do it right the next time they try?
It depends on the student if they decide to use it correctly. But then again, just because somebody does something wrong doesn't mean that they're doing an entire technique wrong. They're probably doing aspects of it wrong, and there's something that they could clean up on. So you can't consider it a complete failure.
But you are. Like, you're saying that there's an idealized way to do things, and if we don't do them in this idealized manner, we don't learn. That's what you're saying.
I'm not saying that you don't learn. I'm just saying that you're not going to get better. You're not going to do a technique as effective. Because what works against beginners doesn't work against experts, and you should always be striving to have expert level technique. And if you didn't have somebody on you to teach you about it and be like, hey, this is what you're doing is flawed, you wouldn't be getting any better. Sure, eventually you might be able to get better at something.
Please. 2 people are doing something for the first time.
Yeah.
They want to play a game. We're going to try to grab each other's legs and take each other to the floor. No instructors, no knowledge of. It's just an interest they have. Can they do something right if they start playing?
It's possible that they might do something right, but probably not.
Where does that rightness come from if nobody's there to tell them it's right?
It just comes from the natural variance of things.
Exactly.
It's okay. And then you grab it. But you don't think that those 2 beginners, if you taught them how to do a double leg correctly,
we're not done. We're not done.
But it's not freeze. It's if I'm here and I see 2 absolute white belts just going at it, right? And they're like, okay, the goal is for you to grab both legs and put them down with a double leg. You don't think that having an instructor which has done it however many hundreds of thousands of times, telling them, okay, this is what you could be doing better, A, B, C, and D. You don't think that that's something that would help them get better at wrestling?
Dan, listen to the point I'm making, please.
So I'm listening to the point you're making. I want this to be a constructive conversation.
2 people are doing something for the first time. They want to take each other to the floor. You say that they potentially could do that, right? Right?
It's possible that they might be able to do that, but they're not doing it correctly.
How would we know that if it's the first time a thing has ever been done?
It's not going to be the first time a thing has ever been done.
So was there a time in history when wrestling first was a thing before anyone ever played the game? Was there a time in history that we're like, okay, we're going to try this thing, we're going to call it wrestling, and we're going to give rules to it. Whoever puts each other on the ground first wins. Would you agree that there was a time in history where 2 people did that for the first time?
And I'm sure that when they did that for the first time, they constantly developed new ways of getting better at it.
Okay, but wait, I agree with you.
And then the knowledge is passed down through generations from instructor to instructor.
So those first 2 people that had never seen that happen before, who've never been told about it, that start engaging in that activity.
Yeah.
How do they get better at doing it if there's nobody there to tell them if it's right or wrong?
Well, it's not 3000 BC anymore. We're in the current.
I'm not saying that.
But that is what you're saying. It's not a thing of a thought experiment. It's a thing of now we're looking at what works the best now. Because it worked then doesn't mean that it works. That's the situation that they had to deal with back then.
No,
Now
it's not
we
what I'm
have high
saying.
level, but now we have high level coaching. Now we have many
Again,
years of competitions to
I'm
see.
not saying that is not the case. Listen to what I'm asking you. Just play the game with me.
No, because your games are
It's
nonsense.
not. There was a time when two people did something that had no one around teaching them to do it. There was a time.
Yes, there absolutely was, but that's not that time anymore. Now's the
I'm not
time.
arguing that it was. Listen to me. We had to get from there to here, correct?
Yeah, and we're here now.
Great. So in that path, there was a time when there was nobody with knowledge about. There was nobody to help these two learn to get to from nothing to good. How did they become effective at the game they played?
Those people were playing with such an absolutely massive disadvantage because
I'm
they
not
didn't have.
arguing.
If you're not arguing that, then clearly you see that technique is passed down through generation to generation.
No.
And then
Well,
is technique not passed
let me
down to
tell you what
generation?
I'm going to tell you what I believe so we can get past this point.
Okay, let me hear what you believe, because
We use the historical record and we use knowledge about to inform what we might want to do now.
yeah,
Perfect. I'm not arguing that. There are better ways to do that, and there are worse ways to do that.
and you know that through technique being refined over years and years.
No, what I mean is there's a better way to get people to do things more effectively than not.
Yeah.
That's what a training intervention is. I have to try to use my knowledge of human behavior that's been passed down through the generations to try to figure out how to get you to do the thing more effectively. I have to figure that out. I could read every book on the fucking subject in the world, but unless I actually try coaching, none of that knowledge will transfer.
So now you're here talking about coaching when coaching is teaching somebody something.
No, coaching.
Coaching isn't teaching somebody?
Well, teaching, coaching, whatever word you want.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is creating changing and affecting behaviors in people. So that's what my job is. I've got to create new behaviors. I got to fix behaviors. I got to create.
You just said fixed behaviors. Does that
Absolutely.
mean that sometimes there's behaviors that are wrong?
Oh no, there are behaviors that are ineffective.
Okay, and there's technique that's ineffective, and you as an instructor have to teach effective technique.
No, I have to teach effect only.
Okay, and effective technique is what's going to get you better effects. And what's the effect? Winning in competition. And what wins a competition? All the people at ADCC, which are drilling something that their instructor taught them, and it was refined over years and years. Is that not true?
I don't. You're making these logical leaps between things that aren't connected. I'm trying to rein it in, but I can't because there's logical fallacy after logical fallacy. You don't know anything about the literature you're arguing against. You don't even know what I do as a coach. You're setting up straw
I'm
men.
not talking about
and you're
literature.
fighting them.
I'm talking about what's happening right now in jiu-jitsu and what works and what's been working. Why is it that nobody is implementing your technique at the highest level?
What is my technique? What are you talking about?
The ecological approach. Why is it that nobody's implementing it at the highest level?
The ecological approach, or let's call it what it is, the constraints-led approach,
Yeah.
okay, is used at the highest level of American basketball, proper football,
And I'm
American football.
not saying that it's not used,
baseball,
because it's definitely used. Constraint-based learning is something that I use on a daily basis, but I also learn technique and learn proper technique on a daily basis so that I'm able to use constraint-based learning effectively. Because if I didn't learn the proper technique, I wouldn't be able to use it effectively in a constraint-based learning environment. Because then when I'm in a constraint-based learning environment, I do something incorrectly. And I'm doing something not as good as it could be. And then I have an instructor who's been doing this for years and years who's teaching me what's the most effective way of doing anything, because it makes it effective if it works at the highest level. And frankly, the techniques we see at the highest level work. And that's why it's an instructor's job to pass down these techniques to the students and have them practice it and then put it into training when they do live training, and especially when they do constraint-based learning. But you can't completely discourage a thing of you learning technique, because again, as we've said, entire human history, it was passed down from generation to generation. Knowledge has grown over time, and it's your job as an instructor to pass down knowledge to your students. And when you pass down knowledge to your students, they get better and they start at a better baseline than where they did years and years ago. Because the blue belts of today, the purple belts today, and the black belts of today are way better than they were 10 years ago. And the reason that happens is because they have constant years of refining technique, and they had it passed down from the previous generation.
Dan, you're just saying facts about reality.
Exactly.
And you're making them mean things that they don't mean.
Facts about reality don't mean things that they mean.
Listen, you're saying that we get better historically.
Correct.
That's a fact. I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
But why does that happen? That happens because we're taught technique.
Okay, freeze. So you're offering a proposition. You're saying the reason that skill gets better over time historically is because of the teaching of technique.
And the teaching in combination with live training, because you can't have one or the other. I can't say that constraint-based learning is nonsense. What I can say is that only constraint-based learning is nonsense. I don't
know what you mean by only constraints-based learning. I don't know what you mean.
Your students' technique. You're not having them drill something that they don't know. You're not correcting them.
Their results correct them. Do you understand?
Their results, but what if there was something that they didn't see? There's plenty of times where people don't see the technique that gets them better. Like they just need a little something. Hey, maybe you should put your hand here. Hey, maybe touch your forehead to the floor here. What's that? That's coaching. That's teaching them instruction. That's teaching them technique that's been passed down from generation to generation.
All you're doing, stop. All you're doing is just telling them something. So,
and
our words
something is teaching them.
Our words don't always have the effect that we think they do.
And sometimes I put my hands on them and I tell them, okay, go into this position, or I do the technique on them so that they can feel it. Because
sometimes that doesn't work either.
It absolutely doesn't work sometimes. But I'm going to tell you what, it works at the highest level.
I don't know
if that doesn't work. What I'm saying, why are you discrediting learning technique from your instructor?
I'm not discrediting learning technique from your instructor.
Then why are you cutting that out of your program?
Because that is not what's happening. The way you guys are describing it is not what's happening. So you are saying that teaching technique is explicitly describing it to them or
showing
it to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And having them drill live, having them go live, having them do constraint-based approaches, live training.
Okay, yeah. Because
it's all in combination with one another. There's not one thing that makes somebody better at jiu-jitsu.
Well, yes, doing work in context is the only, it's the strongest intervention that we can use for the acquisition of skill.
Of course, I'm sure that it's a great way of acquiring skill, but so is learning technique.
You can't do it the other way. So let me give you an extreme example. Again, I don't know how to get you to this, and I'm struggling because I can't. You're not staying consistent. So here's the thing.
I'm saying as consistent as possible. I was saying the entire time that we need both.
I don't know what both means. I don't know what you mean by both.
To learn proper technique.
Dan, I don't know what you mean by that.
You don't know what proper technique is?
Proper technique is whichever thing is effective for you.
And the only way that instructor couldn't help you learn proper technique.
When did that words come out of my mouth that says an instructor couldn't help you learn proper technique? When do those words come out of my mouth?
Greg, you realize that I'm saying they need to drill something that was taught from their instructor.
And I'm saying they don't.
And you're saying they don't need to drill.
Correct.
Okay, how do you drill something that you don't?
Do you want to know how you do it? I'll tell you how you do it. It's easy.
Greg, you need to learn new technique. Why is it that technique is constantly getting better over time?
Stop. You're okay. Those are non sequiturs. Okay, if you want to talk about why technique gets better over time, we can talk about that. But how you learn technique is not the way you think it happens. And the reason I'm saying that is not because Greg Souders has a magic connection to some knowledge out in the universe somewhere. I'm saying this because people who are trained to investigate the claims you're making have investigated these claims.
And the
In the experimental research, the idea of an idealized technique does not seem to exist. Instead, what we found is that there is a parameter by which we operate that if the invariant nature or the topology of a movement matches the demands of the task, regardless of the variation used, we can still achieve effective outcomes. That's what we've discovered. So what would be the optimal training intervention to maximize the thing we learned about? And the conclusion that we're coming to is we need to always keep movement contextually relevant. So whatever training we want to use, it has to be within the context from which it's used. That's what I'm saying. Static drilling is a decontextualized training intervention. It is less effective than contextual training interventions. Verbal instruction falls into this category. Now, verbal instruction can be used at certain times in the skill acquisition process, and it works better in some ways than others. For example, if I use my words to manipulate your intention and attention, if I use my words to get you to focus outside of yourself, performance goes up. If I use my words to get you focused on the angles of your arms, the angles of your knees, performance goes down. This effect is known.
Then,
Now, even what's more interesting,
saying the stuff we're doing brings down performance so much, then why is it working at ADCC? Why is it working at Black Belt IBJJF? Are you just saying that everybody's doing it ineffectively?
Yes, I am.
So you're saying
So stop, pause. Now, okay.
Yep.
so now what we're saying is, what you're saying, Greg, your claim is that all of the top teams, all the best instructors, let's talk about the best teams. Atos, Allianz, B Team, New Wave, Checkmat, all of the best teams. You're saying that all of them are doing it wrong?
Correct.
Do you realize how crazy that claim is?
No.
You saying that all of the best teams are doing something incorrectly.
Do you know how I can say that with confidence? Because you also agree. You said that things get better over time and that the performers of the past were less good as the performers of today, suggesting and inferring that the way people did things in the past was incorrect because we gained more knowledge. Let me finish. We gained more knowledge about how to do things, and that has helped advance our understanding of what we should be doing. And now I'm saying, wait, listen.
It helped advance understanding where
Finish making my point.
But the ecological approach starts you off at zero.
Stop. So now we're not in a special place in history. We need to improve on our current methods so that the thing that you want to happen, people to get better in the future, happens.
Yes, but I agree.
If we use the current now as justification for what we must continue to do, we don't get the effect that you're saying exists, which is an increase in understanding over time.
We constantly need to learn technique and get better at technique and then pass that down over generation. What you're saying is the ecological approach is the end game, because that's what's going to start you off at the absolute. Of course, you're just going to look better in 50 years from now, but how do you think that happens? That happens by constantly learning technique, refining technique, and building upon it. Ecological approach starts you at zero. It doesn't start you at the end.
Why are you saying the ecological approach? The ecological approach doesn't start you anywhere. The ecological approach
start you anywhere.
The ecological approach is a theory of how people use information. It is not a method. It's not. There's no such thing as eco training or fucking eco jujitsu. That's not a thing.
That's not a thing?
No.
Then why do you teach it?
I use a method to get our students to build skill called the constraints-led approach.
Okay.
So I don't know what you guys literally don't know anything about what you're talking about. Like literally zero. Like you're arguing against a position that you don't understand. That's the strangest thing. People come, they're like, "Oh, Greg, you speak in a certain way. You're arrogant." What is more arrogant than challenging a position that you have no knowledge of?
Of course, I have plenty of knowledge of it, because if you're using constraint-based learning, we use that. We use constraint-based learning. You've trained with John. You've trained with John, and you've seen that we use constraint-based learning.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, but do you think that is the only way of working out of constraints?
Stop. You UCLA, you said?
My man, you're glitching out.
Oh,
You're glitching out.
sorry. My phone. Well, let me plug in my phone. Hold on. Am I still here?
You're still here.
I'll hold my phone because I have it plugged in.
Okay.
You said something. What did you say to me? I got distracted.
I said that constraint-based learning
Oh,
is
yeah.
not the only way.
Okay, so
It's a good
you said
training.
you said you use it, right?
We use it in our live training, yes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay, so
75% of our live training is constraint-based, so that we work out of positions of extreme offense and extreme defense. But the way that we know what to do in constraint-based learning is based off of what we learned during class. Is class about to start for you?
No. A stranger walked in, but I'm not concerned with him.
Okay.
So, you hang out, buddy, but I'm on a call. Cool. Do whatever you want. Just don't go on the mat without your shoes on, all right? So, manipulating constraints is something we've been doing since the beginning of time. But to say you use the method, the CLA, you have to understand its function. So, if I asked you a question right now about how CLA functions, you wouldn't be able to answer it because you don't understand how it works.
So if look, you think that I don't know
We got
how it functions
prove it right now.
What?
I can prove it to you right now.
Okay.
That you don't understand what you're saying.
You believe that I don't understand what I'm saying. So
we can show everybody right now.
So okay. Tell me what I don't know.
Sure.
Tell me what constraint-based learning is, and tell me why it
I want you to tell me. You said you know.
Because here's the thing: if I say it, you're just going to immediately say something like, "Nope, you don't know what you're talking about."
I'm not.
Tell me what it is, and I'm going to tell you if I know what it is or not. But what I'm saying is whether or not I'm saying that you need technique to be passed down from your instructor onto you. You need knowledge to be passed down. Everything we know is based off of that.
So when you're using CLA in your room and you see a strong attractor form, what do you do to perturb the attractor? What do you do? What's your first intervention?
Attractor form.
Oh, you said you use CLA and you understand ecological dynamics. So I'm asking an ecological dynamics question.
Just because you're using those words doesn't mean that I don't know what it is.
Yes, it does.
No.
Ask me what De La Riva is.
De La Riva, of course I know what De La Riva is.
Well, no, ask me what it is.
That has nothing to do with what we're saying.
Because I understand jiu-jitsu. So if you ask me jiu-jitsu term, I can define it for you.
How do you understand jiu-jitsu? Is it because somebody taught you and you refined it over time?
I'm making the point.
Because
if I claim I understand jiu-jitsu and use a jiu-jitsu term, I can define it for you. You're saying that you understand ecological dynamics. I'm asking you, when you're using CLA and one of your students is forming a strong attractor and it's no longer becoming an effective movement solution, how do you disrupt the attractor to either bifurcate it or shift it into another skill?
Greg, what I'm saying is that you need technique to be passed down from your instructor. You're saying that you don't need to drill. You're saying that you don't need.
You don't.
But every progression that we've ever made, it just was due to the way that we're learning right now.
Stop. You're just assuming that. You haven't.
How am I assuming it when it's what we see with our own eyes?
Everyone who's watching, I know we got lost 400 viewers. I greatly apologize. I'm trying so hard, man. I don't know how to make the point, guys. I really don't. I'm fucking struggling.
Struggling against your own viewpoints. Crazy how that works.
Oh, I'm not struggling against my own viewpoint. I know my viewpoint very well. You don't. You don't have an understanding of the information processing view, which is largely what informs your practice. And I understand that because I read about that too. You don't have an understanding of ecological dynamics.
And what I have an understanding of is what works in jiu-jitsu and what doesn't work in jiu-jitsu.
What you have an understanding of?
So does every other coach.
What you have an understanding of are your base assumptions based on your own personal experience.
And it's fine. Not my own personal experience, because my personal experience is a drop in the bucket of the collective knowledge in all of jiu-jitsu. You can't just claim that your way is right.
I'm not.
Okay, so then you're wrong.
I am not claiming that Greg Souders' way is right. What I'm claiming is that people who investigate human behavior, who study it, who write theories about it, who do experiments on it, have asked the exact same questions that you are asking about, and the things you are saying they're showing are not what's happening. That's what I'm saying. And you are unfamiliar with that because you have not looked at their work. So you're 30, 40 years behind in understanding human behavior.
30, 40 years behind in understanding human behavior. Greg, the only person who's 30, 40 years behind is you, my friend.
In what way?
Because you could see it with your own eyes. If there was something early on when we had no technique, we would have to use only live training and no technique being passed down.
Look, I don't just tell my students, make this stuff up, learn it on your own. That's not what I do. There's a method that we use to get from no skill to skill.
Yeah.
This method is informed by an understanding of human behavior, by people who are trained to investigate it. And that is what I'm using to inform my practice. You are guessing based on the anecdotes of yourself.
Do you want to know what we use to make our students better?
Sure.
Competition results that work at ADCC.
I don't even know what that means. I don't know what you're saying. This is the equivalent, right? It's like, oh, I understand ecological dynamics. Because, man, Michael Jordan, he fucking wins championships, bro. So Michael Jordan works for Michael Jordan, works for everybody. Ecological dynamics, bet.
Okay, and then what works for the mass majority of people who have accomplished anything in the sport is probably but you just said that everybody's doing it wrong.
Yes. And historically, that's been true for every generation. The people were doing it wrong in the 1930s. The people were doing it wrong in the 1950s. The people were doing it wrong in the 1970s. Each generation updates the previous model.
That's true.
Because the
Each
previous
generation
model
does.
is wrong. So in 2025, we are not immune to this. Our models will be updated, and they will be wrong too.
And
I am subject to
they
that,
are wrong, but
just as you are.
What did you say? You glitched out again.
I am subject to that the same way that you are.
Absolutely. And I'm saying that technique is going to evolve over time, and it's going to be passed down from generation to generation.
I'm not even contesting that, so I don't know why you keep saying it.
Because you're completely removing technique from the equation. You're completely removing generational knowledge from the equation.
I'm changing the idea of what we as a jiu-jitsu community think technique is. I'm saying technique is the mechanical way we express our individual effectiveness. So I am effective in the way that I am effective. You are effective in the way that you're effective. There might be a similar topology to the techniques that we do, because in order for it to occur, there must be some parameter by which it captures the variation present to still be effective. But ultimately, if we were to measure it, they would be different things. So we can get similar outcomes expressed with different variation, with different variations.
And
there is no.
And you don't think an instructor could teach you what that is?
When you
or do you think
say,
only?
Okay, when you say I don't think an instructor.
Just a heads up, we're gonna have to end this pretty soon because training's at 3:45 and it's 3:08 right now. So
what I'm saying is that if you mean by teaching using static or decontextualized drilling and using verbal interventions as your main mechanism, no. It's not going to affect you.
I'm saying you need both.
You're
saying we only need one.
I'm saying that those two interventions have a way, we view them in a specific way in ecological dynamics. There's a way that we use modeling of behavior, and there's a way we use verbal interventions. There's a specific way that we use it because we know their effects.
Okay.
You don't know their effects. You're just shouting words at your students and hope they stick.
No, I'm not just shouting words at my students. I'm shouting them what's the proper thing to do, showing them what's the proper thing to do.
No, you're showing them what you think the proper thing is.
Okay, what the most proper thing is right now in the current scope of jiu-jitsu, that their job is as the next generation to build upon.
But by your own definition, that can't be.
Yes, it can, because that's how all progress has been made in human history, is teaching the next generation.
How does something go from optimal to optimal?
Something can go from being good to being better and constantly grow over time. And what's the best right now is all we have to work with.
No.
And right now, our job is to teach the best thing we possibly can to our students and hope to God that our students build on it, not for us, but for the future generations.
So you're just using, you're just using hopes and dreams.
What?
You said you're hoping that you're right.
Okay,
and that they can build off it.
yeah, of course, they're going to build off of it. What I'm saying is you can only ask that each generation builds upon the previous generation. Whatever the best technique is today, your job is to teach what the best technique is today and have the next generation refine it, build upon what's already the best right now, and continue. What was the best 20 years ago to the best today still closely resembles what's good, but it's built upon.
Have you
What are
seen people dribbling basketballs in 1930 compared to now?
I don't watch basketball. But,
look at it. There's nothing right about what they were doing in 1930.
okay, but the same base framework was probably the same.
You're saying probably. You didn't investigate it. You have no idea.
Okay, yeah, because I don't watch basketball.
Well, then why are you bringing these up? Why are you bearing evidence that you have no knowledge of?
The knowledge is that everything that's ever been done has been based off of passing on the generation, having them build upon it. So it's my job as an instructor.
What is the mechanism? What causes the transfer? What causes the transfer?
Teaching them what's correct right now, what's not correct, showing them, having them drill what's correct so that they build a muscle memory in their head, and then having them go live. So that they further, solidify it.
So you just used a bunch of words that have no definition. So muscle memory, solidify.
I guess that makes two.
Best, proper. These are just things that Dan is using. Like, again.
But Dan's not using it. But it's not just Dan using it. It's every single top team in jiu-jitsu.
Bertrand Russell said, if 50 million people believe a stupid thing, it's still a stupid thing.
So you think that that drilling technique and having it passed down over generation to generation is stupid?
I don't think drilling is what passes it down.
I think that there are many things that go into passing knowledge through generations, and you can't completely discredit that.
I'm not discrediting the passing down of knowledge, Dan. I'm discrediting what you're saying is the main mechanism for doing that. I'm saying that when investigated, verbal intervention and decontextualized drilling has the least amount of transfer compared to the other interventions that we have available to us to do exactly what you're saying our job is. And I am using those up-to-date methods.
Okay. Well, I got to run. It's 3:12. I would like to invite you to continue this one day. Is that something that you'd want to do?
Buddy, I will talk to you anytime you want.
For sure. I'm happy to have a conversation. I'm happy that we were able to talk about it.
Look, Rob Gray has 3 books, very easy to read. If you read those books and you come across his evidence, I urge you to at least read one so we can talk about it. So you're informed before our next conversation.
Yeah.
And that way we can actually argue what's happening rather than just sit here and throw straw men at each other.
So you're saying that you're using straw men?
Oh no, I'm not. I'm trying to get rid of yours because I can't get to the crux of the argument.
Okay. If you say so, Greg. I really would love to talk more, but it's 3:13 right now. I just have one question before we go. What color are you going to paint your fingernails for the next debate?
Silver. So it's like running out. I got to get them redone.
All right, dude.
Oh, wait, I have a question for you. Wait.
I got to run.
One question. Wait. Is this conversation going to get you back on the senior squad, or are you still going to be in the junior squad?
Is this conversation? My man, I got 3rd place at ADCC.
Oh, so you're back in the senior squad? Danaher likes you again?
I don't think that Danaher ever hated me, but.
Oh no, I'm just wondering.
What?
Well, maybe
you glitched out again.
Well, maybe next time when Danaher and I are having a conversation, he'll let you join in.
What, you glitched out? I'm sorry, brother. It's like super fuzzy right now.
Dude, I'm just teasing you, man. Let's talk again.
What did you say?
I said I'm teasing you, buddy. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
We'll talk again.
I swear to God, it's like, look, I'll take a screenshot right now and send it to you just so you can see what I'm talking about. It's just like, I can't, you're not loading.
My phone is heating up, so I think that's what it is.
Okay. You should get us on a safe case. Bye, Greg.
See you, pal.